Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Lucy Letby. Today, we will discuss the case of a baby killer who was dubbed the most brutal in British forensic history. This case began in 2015. In the UK, about 700,000 babies are born each year, with around 3,000 admitted to the hospital in Chester, located in northwest England. The following year, from June 2015 to June 2016, staff in the neonatal department noticed a sharp increase in infant mortality rates. This troubling trend was occurring in the wards where premature and ill babies were treated. Doctors sensed that something was wrong, and internal investigations did not uncover any medical explanations for the deaths. The high infant mortality rate prompted police to investigate the neonatal unit, where they uncovered disturbing circumstances surrounding several deaths. After an extensive investigation, a young nurse who had worked at the hospital for many years was arrested. The investigation has revealed disturbing details about the incidents, leaving the families of the dead children devastated by the news. 5 years after the first child's death, police contacted the family and others, forcing the parents to hear heartbreaking details about what had happened to their child and testify against the suspect. In court, numerous witness statements were presented. The children were murdered using various methods. One was poisoned with insulin by a nurse, while another suffered severe liver damage. However, the most common method used was injecting air into the bloodstream, which created an air bubble that blocked blood flow. This technique was particularly insidious as it left little evidence, making it hard to prove it was lethal. The motive behind the nurse's actions remains unclear. The police determined that she gained knowledge about blood flow from the courses she took to enhance her qualifications. They warned her that injecting air into a vein could be extremely dangerous. Soon after completing these courses, a tragic incident occurred where a baby died after being injected with air through an intravenous drip. In this case, it was difficult to establish the exact cause of death. The parents of the baby described his condition as critical. They would visit the hospital every morning and leave in the evening, hoping for his recovery. However, one night his condition suddenly worsened, and the doctors believed he had no chance of survival. This led the parents to make the heartbreaking choice to disconnect their newborn from life support. The nurse killer worked another night shift the following day and attempted to harm the sister of the initial victim. Fortunately, the girl was able to escape unharmed. The third incident involved a child known in court as Baby D, where air was intentionally introduced into the child's body. This incident took place just 2 weeks after the first one, in June 2015. Notably, Baby D was a full-term infant, unlike the other victims who were all premature and receiving specialized care until they could survive without life support. Despite being full-term, Baby D had some health complications. The mother went through a long and difficult labor, after which the baby had difficulty breathing. The baby should not have been in the neonatal department, but due to a tragic coincidence, he ended up there. The baby's mother was the first to testify in court against the nurse who was suspected of murder. In her statement, she described seeing the nurse leaning over their child's crib during the day. Although it seemed like the nurse was doing nothing, her wandering around looked very suspicious. That night, the parents were awakened by a nurse who informed them that their child had suddenly become very ill. When they arrived at the ward, the doctor attempted to resuscitate Baby D, performing life-saving measures repeatedly until he realized the baby had died. This all happened right in front of the baby's mother and father. The investigation revealed that during the night shift, the suspect gave 3 lethal injections to the child. After Baby D died, doctors observed an unusual rash on the victim's stomach. Small purple spots that the medical staff could not identify. They were unsure of its significance. Later, this distinctive rash appeared on many victims of the nurse killer. Interestingly, the spots appeared briefly and then vanished completely. One of the victims, known as Baby E, was part of a set of twins, and their mother also testified in court. The twins were diagnosed with a minor illness that required treatment in a medical facility. While the mother was with her husband, she began experiencing contractions 50 kilometers away from the hospital. They rushed to the hospital, where she had a cesarean section, and the newborns were immediately taken to the neonatal department. The mother stayed in the hospital to recover from the surgery. Her husband left for work, and on August 3rd, she went to check on her twin babies to make sure everything was all right. She followed her regular hygiene routine by wiping their heads and necks and changing their diapers. A few hours later, around 9 p.m., she heard her son crying loudly and rushed to his side. When she got there, she noticed blood around his mouth. The nurse responsible for the care of the babies was nearby in the department at that time. It was later determined that the mother almost caught the nurse in the act of trying to harm her baby, which scared the nurse away. However, the mother didn't have enough time to fully comprehend the danger her child was in. The mother screamed for help, prompting another nurse to escort her to the ward to help her calm down. Meanwhile, the baby started to bleed heavily, and the bleeding could not be stopped. The doctors fought to save the baby's life for about an hour, but their efforts were unsuccessful. Similar to previous cases, the baby had a suspicious rash on his body. The attending physician noted the rash recurred around the time of death and commented that he had never seen anything like it before. Determined to uncover the mystery behind these alarming occurrences, the doctor began researching medical reference books. He discovered that the rash was linked to a blockage of the pulmonary artery. This revelation marked a significant turning point for the medical staff, as they were now closer to solving the mysterious deaths of infants in the clinic. During the trial, the doctor admitted that he only fully understood the situation months after the deaths of the children. The doctors at the clinic became increasingly concerned about the cases involving children. It was clear that something troubling was happening, but no one suspected that it could be caused by someone meant to safeguard the children's lives. One doctor, who determined that all the children had suffered from pulmonary embolism, began to investigate further. He soon noticed a troubling pattern. Every time a child died, a nurse named Lucy Letby was on duty and had been seen by the parents before the deaths. It was hard to believe. No one could imagine that someone as kind as Lucy could be responsible for such actions. Lucy Letby was born on January 4, 1990. She grew up in Harris Ford and attended Elston High School and Hartford College. A childhood friend said she was a dedicated student who had wanted to be a nurse since she was a child. Lucy pursued her passion for caring for newborns by studying nursing at the University of Chester. During her studies, she worked as a nurse for 3 years, completing an internship at Liverpool Women's Hospital. The whole family was proud of her high academic achievements and believed that she wanted to help children. In 2010, Lucy started working as a nurse in the neonatal department of the hospital where many tragic events occurred. Her family described her as someone who loved saving the lives of babies, witnessing their recovery, and supporting their families. She was actively involved in charity work and participated in fundraising for sick children. Because of her kind and gentle personality, many found it hard to believe that she could be involved in the deaths of children. However, evidence suggested that Lucy was the one who injected air into the bloodstream of her young victims. Doctors took time to investigate additional evidence to confirm their suspicions about Lucy's involvement, as there were many uncertainties. Ultimately, everyone agreed that Lucy should be reported. The head physician became aware of the neonatal department's concerns regarding Lucy. However, that evening, the management was preoccupied with their own issues and overlooked the seriousness of the situation. They even pressured doctors not to cause panic, fearing that it would draw unwanted public attention to the problem. The hospital's reputation was at stake, and management was worried about the potential consequences. At this point, the doctors had repeatedly asked the hospital management to take action against the nurse they suspected of being a killer. Unfortunately, their concerns were completely ignored, and no one took them seriously. Their fellow nurses were also confused, unsure whether to go to the police, as they found it hard to believe that one of their own could commit such terrible acts. This left the doctors in a difficult position, forcing them to step back and reevaluate all they knew. They were focused on the alarming trend of healthy or nearly healthy children, who had been born prematurely without any clear reasons, continuing to die. These babies did not respond to resuscitation efforts, and in most cases, developed a mysterious rash that vanished after death. Ultimately, they decided that the best course of action was to carry out a police investigation to find out if Lucy was responsible in these situations. As a result, the hospital staff contacted the police directly. The doctor who initially reported the concern stated that he took all necessary steps to protect the children in his care. However, he was unable to communicate with upper management, and any delay could jeopardize the lives of other infants. So he decided to call the police. Police quickly began investigating these horrific crimes. As the case stalled, rumors started circulating within the hospital. It became evident, even from a brief examination, that Lucy was connected to the deceased children, as these incidents only occurred during her shifts. She was consistently present when the children faced difficulties. This information spread rapidly among the medical staff. Regardless of whether the rumors were proven true, tensions within the team escalated. Lucy faced open accusations, and she was subjected to significant pressure, yet she maintained her innocence regarding the baby's deaths. Lucy believes they are trying to blame her for the failures of other doctors. This situation began in July 2015. Later, a group of doctors emerged who attempted to blame a nurse for the deaths of newborns. They voiced their concerns, and during the trial, Lucy accused them of conspiring to hold her responsible for the deaths in the neonatal unit. Lucy openly made these accusations because she believed they were trying to cover up serious violations connected to hospital management, which could potentially implicate many staff members and administrators in the deaths of the infants. In reality, doctors were investigating the causes of the newborn deaths. They expressed their disbelief that a nurse, whose role was to care for and protect children, could intentionally administer lethal injections. However, as more evidence was reviewed, the connections became increasingly evident. After thoroughly examining the situation, the doctors concluded that the only possible explanation for the deaths was the introduction of air, which was noted to be associated with unexplained spots. The major challenge was that lethal injections leave almost no evidence, making it extremely difficult to prove they were the cause of death. The only potential evidence against Lucy involved 2 cases of insulin poisoning in children. However, at the time the tests were conducted, these cases had not yet been evaluated. In the past, it was extremely difficult to determine these tests. However, the seriousness of the situation required the doctors and investigators to be diligent in gathering evidence, as it could prove Lucy's guilt in an extremely disturbing crime. They were finally able to obtain blood samples taken 8 months before the trial began. The 2 boys, each from 2 different sets of twins, had been poisoned with insulin. The insulin levels in their blood were significantly higher than normal, and such a high dose could not have been given by mistake, as the medical facility had put safeguards in place to prevent accidental overdose. However, the objects showed abnormal indicators that led to their deaths, which was confirmed through examination of the evidence. These insulin-poisoned children were taken care of by Lucy. Another significant case in the investigation was the death of a child, which was likely the most brutal. This was the same baby who began bleeding heavily, and the mother saw Lucy nearby. Medical staff reported that a metal instrument had been inserted into the baby's mouth, causing severe internal injuries. During the nearly hour-long resuscitation attempt, The baby bled from both the mouth and nose, losing about 25% of his blood volume. Doctors fought to save the baby, performing CPR and injecting 5 doses of adrenaline to stimulate the heart. Although the heartbeat returned temporarily, the baby did not breathe for more than 15 minutes, giving him no chance of survival. At the time of death, before any investigation began, it was concluded that the cause was natural. Extensive bleeding can sometimes result from intestinal infections in babies. Since there was no suspicion of medical personnel being involved at that time, an autopsy was not performed. This decision is viewed as the biggest mistake made. If it had been established then that the bleeding was due to a foreign object, the investigation would have started sooner, leading to more evidence against Lucy. A similar situation arose with a girl who was one of a set of triplets. After an autopsy, forensic experts discovered she had a serious liver injury. Experienced specialists compared the injury severity to the aftermath of a major accident. However, the exact cause of the girl's ruptured liver was never determined. Lucy, the suspect, went on to kill the second triplet, who was later named in court. There were no other tragic incidents during Lucy's long holiday in Ibiza. However, 2 children died just hours after she returned to work for her first shift. A third child was also in danger, but the parents insisted on taking their child to another medical facility because they felt something was wrong and did not trust the hospital staff. On June 23, 2016, during a separate set of triplet assessments at the trial, a baby was in critical condition with a severely swollen stomach, struggling to breathe. He was placed on a ventilator while numerous staff members, including Lucy, worked frantically around him. The baby's body showed signs of swelling, and his brain was deprived of oxygen for a long time. Doctors worked tirelessly to save him for 17 hours before he passed away. They waited for the transport team to arrive to transfer the baby to the central hospital, while the remaining staff anxiously counted down the minutes until help arrived. Lucy made a shocking comment. "He would not survive anyway." She said it so calmly that everyone was taken aback. She seemed to take pleasure in the unfolding drama and appeared to be waiting for the baby to die. Following these incidents, the doctors, feeling desperate, contacted the police. After the attack on the triplets, Lucy was moved to another department. In that new department, they did not encounter similar issues, despite having the same staff and responsibilities, and the mysterious deaths ceased. However, the doctors recognized the need for stricter security measures. Consequently, Lucy was suspended from work a month. During this time, the hospital continued to investigate, but there was not enough evidence against Lucy. In response to the suspension without any clear reason, Lucy filed a complaint against the hospital. As a result, the management apologized and decided to reinstate her. However, her colleagues disagreed with this decision. They argued that Lucy should only return to work after installing surveillance cameras in every room to monitor her actions. This solution worked, and after the cameras were installed, no further incidents occurred, even after Lucy resumed work. At the same time, the police were conducting an investigation. They discovered evidence showing that Lucy was trying to get the attention of a doctor from the resuscitation team, whose identity remains confidential. Love letters addressed to him were later found in her home. This doctor worked in the neonatal department, but he was married, 17 years older than Lucy, and saw her only as a friend and colleague, with no romantic interest. Before that, they attended advanced training courses in London together, had lunch, went for walks, communicated constantly, and he often drove her home. When the doctor arrived to testify, Lucy lost control. Before this point, she had been distant and unresponsive, but when she saw him, she began to cry and tried to leave until her lawyer calmed her down. This reaction was puzzling and difficult to explain. Lucy asserts that her feelings for the resuscitation doctor are purely friendship, and he supports her statement. However, psychologists and experts investigating the case noted her behavior. Lucy wrote him love letters, expressed joy when he gave her chocolate, and closely monitored his social media accounts as well as those of his wife and teenage children. Experts believe that Lucy deliberately created situations to get closer to him, especially since he was the one performing the resuscitation in all the relevant cases. However, during court proceedings, Lucy dismissed these claims as baseless speculation. In July 2018, Lucy Letby was arrested for the first time. Police conducted 2 simultaneous raids, one at her parents' home and another at her own residence. During these searches, a significant amount of evidence was collected, which aided the investigation and supported the case against her. This evidence included medical documents, notes, stickers, and photographs of children's cards found on a mobile phone. More details will be shared later. She was released on bail but was arrested again a year later. In June 2019, Lucy Letby was charged with the murder of 7 children and the attempted murder of 10 others. The trial will begin in October 2022. Is expected to last at least 6 months due to the sheer volume of material to be reviewed, including more than 100 hours of questioning in some 5,500 depositions. However, there are significant restrictions on sharing information because the case is both complex and sensitive. In particular, the identities of the deceased are being kept secret because of their age. Key pieces of evidence include postcards that Lucy created for the victims' parents, expressing her condolences and posing with them. These documents were found on Lucy's phone. A key moment in the court proceedings was when stickers discovered in the Lucy's home were presented. One sticker describes her as the embodiment of evil, while another reveals her confession to killing babies. The note stated that Lucy felt she did not deserve to live and that she had deliberately killed them because she believed she was not good enough to take care of them. She described herself as a bad and evil person. It was also written on the back of the note that she needed help and could not go on anymore. Lucy kept a diary in which she wrote about the problems she faced in life. Lucy thought that she would never have children or a loving husband and family. Lucy felt helpless in everything and was often afraid. She expressed her pain in these short notes filled with despair. She cried every day at the same time. Even though she wrote that nothing was wrong, she still felt anxious about her situation. Initially, Lucy was happy to befriend the resuscitation doctor she loved. She detailed their encounter and how he supported her. However, he turned his back on her in early 2018, just before her first arrest. This was when Lucy was suspended from work, which caused her to fall into depression, as her job was her purpose in life. The lawyer argued that these notes did not prove her guilt, especially given the myriad of issues she faced. She was suspended, hospital staff were accusing her of abuse, and her mental state was unstable. She blamed herself for what happened because she felt she did not have enough time to help her young patients. The defense argued that Lucy's notes did not admit to the murders and suggested that she was only indirectly involved. The prosecution presented a note containing the names of the triplets who were victims of Lucy's attack as evidence. The note included names, birth dates, expressions of regret, and phrases that implied she was involved in the tragedy. It was found under the bed along with the children's medical records. When police searched her apartment, Lucy claimed that these notes could have accidentally ended up at her home when she forgot to throw away all the contents of the pockets of her work coat. Lucy appeared in court visibly emotional as she took the witness stand. She expressed her devastation over being suspended from her job, which had been incredibly important to her. Lucy described her time in prison as particularly challenging, compounded by her depression. The situation escalated when police arrived at her home to conduct a search at 6 a.m. while she was with her father. Being accused of multiple child murders was a complete shock to her. She was released on bail 3 days after her arrest, but in 2019, she faced a second arrest. Lucy stated that these experiences left a lasting impact on her life, making her fearful of loud noises and heightening her sensitivity to stimuli. A prison psychologist later diagnosed her with post-traumatic stress disorder. The trial made everything worse for the Lucy. She had to travel an hour and a half to the courtroom and was only returned to her cell around 7 p.m., which was exhausting for her. She often refused to attend court hearings in front of the families of the murdered children, which the victims' parents found disrespectful. In court, the Lucy expressed that she was going through a tough time filled with discrimination and accusations. She also lost her cherished job, which affected her deeply. The pressure was overwhelming, especially with the possibility of losing her freedom and never getting married. At times, she felt completely helpless during this difficult period. She began to experience mental health challenges due to increasing pressures and difficulties. According to Lucy, she started her career at a medical institution in 2010 as a full-time qualified nurse, caring for 3 to 4 babies in her unit. To enhance her skills, she participated in special training courses and continually pursued additional education to improve her knowledge. Ultimately, Lucy earned the qualification of a mentor, which is a notable achievement for a nurse in her field. Lucy loved her job and enjoyed learning new skills to improve her abilities. In the spring of 2015, she completed a 6-month course in Liverpool, which enabled her to work with babies and children coming from intensive care. She took great pride in her work and would not trade her position for anything. From June 2015 to June 2016, Lucy continued to work in the same department. During this time, several critically ill patients were admitted to the hospital simultaneously. The complex needs of the children included serious conditions, such as blood clotting disorders. Lucy worked incredibly hard, accumulating many overtime hours. She dedicated all her free time to her job, which took a toll on her, leaving her completely exhausted by her daily responsibilities. In 2015, one of the children sadly passed away. This was a challenging moment for Lucy, but she felt supported by her colleagues, who encouraged one another as best they could. Although this incident was likely not her fault, Lucy appreciated how it brought the entire team together, and she wished to experience that sense of unity again. The situation was complicated by many controversial aspects. The prosecution thoroughly investigated and gathered information about children's deaths in the hospital over a 6-year period, starting from when the staff filed a complaint. Throughout this time, Lucy was seen as a skilled and competent nurse with a strong work ethic. She was highly regarded as a specialist, making it hard to believe she could be involved in the deaths. The investigation gathered strong evidence that pointed to her guilt in the horrific murders committed by the nurse. It is noteworthy that she acted completely openly. The jury took 22 days to deliberate before finding her guilty of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 10 others. However, thanks to media coverage, she became known as the most brutal child killer in British history. On August 21, 2023, Lucy Letby was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the harshest penalty available under UK law. She is the 4th woman in the history of the UK to receive such a sentence. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kathy Martin. Kathy Martin was born on October 25, 1959, in Houston, Texas. Kathy grew up in a peaceful and happy family. During her childhood, she was very close to her older sister. When she was a teenager, Kathy met Mike Odom, whom she would later marry and start a family. After the wedding, the two settled in a quiet suburb outside of Houston, and soon after, they had a daughter and a son. After the birth of their second child, Kathy stayed home and took care of the children. Meanwhile, Mike worked at her father's small sign factory. Thanks to the financial support of Kathy's parents, the family was able to provide for their children. Therefore, Kathy was able to take care of the children without having to worry about working extra. On March 3, 1987, Kathy stayed home to take care of the children as usual. Mike went to work and then met up with friends at a bar after work. He called Kathy from a pay phone, but she didn't answer. This worried Mike because Kathy rarely left the house. He called several times but got no response. Worried about his wife, Mike called their neighbor, Tim Robinson, and asked him to check on her. Tim went to the house and knocked on the door, but no one answered. He looked through the living room window and saw that the television was still on. So he knocked again but got no response. At this point, he began to worry that something serious might have happened to Kathy. Instead of going home to call Mike or the police, he decided to drive around town looking for police patrols. After a few minutes of searching, he spotted a police car and explained the situation. He asked them to check on Kathy to see if she was okay. When the police arrived at the house, they also got no response to their knocking. They decided to try the door and found it unlocked. Once inside, the police found Kathy's older daughter lying unconscious on the sofa, clearly traumatized but still alive. The police quickly called an ambulance and continued to check other rooms in the house. In the bedroom, they found the younger child lying in her crib, safe and sound. But when they entered another room, they discovered a horrific scene. Kathy was lying on the floor, covered in blood and naked. The police immediately determined that she was dead. Her arms were also tied with a light cord. Paramedics took Kathy's daughter to the hospital and began investigating the crime scene. Kathy's father arrived at the house, but the police did not reveal any specific details. Instead, they asked him to go to the hospital to care for his granddaughter when she woke up. While waiting at the hospital, he learned of his daughter's death from a news report on TV. When Mike arrived at the house, the police quickly discovered something strange. He arrived late and had blood-like stains on his shirt. The police asked him to hand over his clothes and answer questions. During this time, the police discovered some interesting signs. They found several blood stains in the bathroom, indicating that the attacker had tried to hide the evidence after the crime. This suggested that the attacker had been in the house for some time to clean up. Forensic experts also discovered some important clues. There were no signs of forced entry, and all the windows and doors except the front door were locked. This suggested that Kathy had invited the attacker into the house or that the attacker had a key. Police speculated that the attacker may have threatened to harm Kathy's children if she screamed or resisted. Therefore, Kathy may have complied with the attacker's demands, hoping to be spared, but was ultimately murdered. As doctors worked to save Kathy's daughter, they discovered that she had been brutally beaten, most likely with her bare hands. She spent several hours in critical condition at the hospital, and her chances of survival were still very low. After examining Kathy's body, medical experts determined that she had suffered severe injuries with 16 stab wounds, most of which were concentrated in the abdomen. They also discovered that she had been sexually assaulted and collected biological samples of the offender from the scene. However, at that time, DNA analysis methods were not widely used in forensic science. Therefore, experts were unable to extract DNA profiles from biological samples. They were only able to determine the killer's blood type, so the sample was sent to the lab for further analysis. The police had noticed suspicious stains on his shirt early in the investigation and had kept the clothes for examination. His behavior that evening was very suspicious. He had gone out with friends after work, but instead of going home when he couldn't reach his wife, he asked a neighbor to check on him. The police had seen similar cases before, where a husband killed his wife and created an alibi by going out with friends. He would then ask someone else to check on his wife to avoid being the first to discover the body and throwing the police off the trail. The police expanded their investigation to see if Mike might have planned the murder before meeting his friends. They also discovered that Mike had a criminal record. After graduating from high school, he was arrested for selling drugs to an undercover police officer. Mike was sentenced to 6 years in prison but only served 2 years before being paroled. He later married Kathy. Although Mike had a criminal record, the police needed more evidence to charge him. The police also began investigating Mike's neighbor, Tim, because of signs of suspicion. Tim drove around town looking for patrol officers instead of calling the police. The police checked Tim's car and found suspicious blood-like stains on the carpet. They sent these samples to the lab for analysis. Now investigators wondered if Mike and Tim might have worked together to commit the crime. After completing the report, the medical examiner came to an important conclusion. Kathy's time of death was around 1 p.m. before she was discovered around 6 p.m. The police expanded their investigation to determine the suspects' whereabouts around that time and to find out what they did after the murder. Mike and Tim both claimed to be at work at the time. So the police set out to see if their statements were accurate. 2 days after the murder, they received a call from the hospital saying Kathy's daughter had woken up. The police went to see her in the hope that she would provide important information about what had happened. However, they encountered a major obstacle. The 4-year-old girl's memory was almost completely erased. She only remembered a light-haired man entering the house, while Mike and Tim had dark hair. But the police did not rule them out as suspects. They believed that the severe trauma could have made her memory inaccurate. The police received a call from the lab with surprising information. Experts examined the evidence and found that the stain on Tim's car carpet was motor oil, and the stain on Mike's shirt was just paint, not evidence of a crime. In addition, many of Mike and Tim's co-workers also confirmed that they had been at work all day and did not leave until the evening. Thus, they had no opportunity to go to Kathy's house and commit the crime. The police requested a lie detector test and the results showed that neither of them were lying. There was no conclusive evidence. The police had to review the entire case and investigate other suspects who might be familiar to Kathy's family. Because the attacker could have easily entered Kathy's house. During the investigation, they had conversations with Kathy's relatives and friends to find out who they thought might have committed the crime. Many of them immediately named the same person, Greg. Greg was Kathy's brother-in-law, and her loved ones revealed that she often complained about his behavior. Specifically, according to Kathy, Greg openly flirted with her and repeatedly tried to convince her to have sex with him. Kathy also said that Greg often made inappropriate comments about her appearance, especially about her abdomen. And according to the evidence collected, we know that most of the injuries were on Kathy's abdomen. The police also knew that Greg had a history of illegal drug use and a criminal record. Therefore, the police began to suspect him and soon found some important clues. They found Greg's fingerprints matched one in Kathy's house, as well as a hair that matched his. However, it should be noted that Greg often visited Kathy's family, so it is possible that the fingerprints and hair were in the house before the murder occurred. Kathy's parents also believed that he was the one who killed their daughter. Kathy's mother specifically remembered one time when Greg visited Kathy's daughter at the hospital. When she saw Greg, she had a clear look of fear on her face. These observations suggested that she was afraid of him. However, when asked, she could not remember what happened on the day of the murder. After hearing all this information, the police summoned Greg for questioning. However, he denied any involvement in the murder and said that he was with a friend at the time. During the questioning, Greg asked to go to the parking lot because he was afraid of being fined for expired parking. However, he did not return to the police station. Greg's wife, Kathy's sister, said that on the day of the murder, Greg dropped her off at around 10:30 a.m. and picked her up at 2:30 p.m. This meant that Greg had a 4-hour window around the time of the murder, enough time for him to commit the crime. However, the police still did not find enough evidence to prove Greg's involvement in the murder. In a last-ditch effort to find more clues, the police decided to analyze a semen sample taken from Kathy's body. However, at that time, the technology only allowed for the blood type of the owner of the semen sample to be determined. In addition, the analysis of the samples collected from the case was too small to be tested. However, the police still decided to perform the test. The results showed that the blood type of the owner of the semen sample matched Greg's blood type, but this was not enough to conclude that he was guilty. As a result, the police were unable to arrest him. They continued to search for more evidence, but were unable to prove that Greg was involved in the case. Kathy's family believed that Greg was the killer. Kathy's sister Shelley still did not believe that her husband was involved in the case and continued to live with him. In the years that followed, the police continued to revisit the case, hoping to find any new clues. In 1998, 11 years after Kathy was murdered, they requested a DNA analysis on the remaining semen sample. However, experts were only able to extract a partial DNA profile, which, when compared to Greg's DNA, showed that Greg was among the 2% of the population who could match the profile. He could not be arrested based on this result. The police again called Greg in for questioning, telling him that the semen from Kathy's body matched his DNA. Greg then changed his original statement, saying that Kathy had been romantically involved with him and that he had actually visited her on the day of the murder, but Greg insisted that she was still alive when he left. The police were suspicious of Greg's sudden change in story because suspects often change their stories when they hear about DNA evidence. In addition, Kathy had complained about Greg's flirtations, feeling uncomfortable around him. So it was unlikely that she would have had a secret relationship with him. But the police knew that they could not convict without a perfect DNA match. The local police reviewed the case and confirmed that a guilty verdict was almost impossible, and the case was put on hold again for many years. In 2002, the police reopened the case and asked for help from forensic scientist Catherine Long. At the time, Catherine was doing groundbreaking DNA research. She and her colleagues wanted to know if the offender's DNA might still be on Kathy's body after the strangulation, and if they could extract that DNA for analysis. To test this, Catherine and her team conducted a simulation experiment. They followed the steps the perpetrators took by briefly strangling each other, then taking samples from their hands and necks for analysis. The results showed that even in such a short interaction, there were still enough skin cells to extract and analyze DNA. The police began to focus on the available evidence when they were unable to re-examine her body. They decided to thoroughly examine all the items related to the case to see if the perpetrator had come into contact with them. They quickly noticed the string of lights that the killer had used to tie Kathy's hands, which the police gave to Catherine and her colleagues to examine. As they began their work, they noticed that the string had been stored in a paper bag. This was important because the paper bag allowed air to circulate, preventing moisture buildup and protecting the biological samples. Experts used cotton swabs to collect biological samples from the entire length of the rope. They paid special attention to areas on the rope that still had traces of Kathy's blood. After analysis, they discovered 2 DNA profiles. The first profile, belonging to the victim Kathy, the second profile completely matched Greg's DNA sample. The police finally had evidence that Greg was the one who tied Kathy's hands, and that he was the killer. 15 years after Kathy's death, the perpetrator was finally arrested. During questioning, Greg did not confess, insisting that he had a romantic relationship with Kathy. The police did not believe him. While awaiting trial, Greg was detained. A cellmate of Greg's contacted the police and said that Greg had confessed to him. According to the friend, Greg told them the details of the attack and murder. Greg said that one day, he had been using illegal drugs and went to Kathy's house. Once inside, Greg tried to force Kathy to have sex, but she refused and asked him to leave. However, Greg became aggressive and attacked Kathy's daughter, causing many serious injuries. Greg assured Kathy that if she did not comply with his wishes, he would kill her. Kathy had no choice but to agree to protect her children. Greg then tied her up, attacked her, and killed her with many injuries. To cover up the crime, Greg washed the blood off himself in the bathroom and changed into Kathy's husband's clothes before leaving the school. The police forced Greg to face the truth. This time, Greg confessed to killing Kathy. In 2004, he pleaded guilty in court and was sentenced to 45 years in prison. However, he only served 4 years before dying at the age of 56 of liver cancer. Kathy's husband, Mike, died at the age of 45. For 15 years, Kathy's family, including her parents and children, waited patiently, trusting that the police would find the killer. Although they believed Greg was the killer, they saw him continue to live with their second daughter, but there was nothing they could do. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Belinda Temple. Belinda Temple was born and raised in Texas. In 1986, Belinda went to college in her hometown, while her twin sister, Brenda, left to study at Stephen F. Austin University. Belinda decided to stay with her parents because she was dating Marshall Kummer, who was 3 years older than her. She was completely absorbed in the relationship. However, Belinda's parents were not pleased. They were concerned that the relationship would disrupt her studies, leading to her having children early and dropping out of school. This caused a lot of tension in the family. Belinda's mother, Carol, did not agree to her daughter living with Marshall. Belinda was a strong-willed and determined girl, and she may have taken her mother's advice as a threat. So at a family dinner when Marshall was invited, Belinda and Marshall, despite their mother's objections, announced that they were getting married. The atmosphere at the dinner table became heavy and quiet. Belinda decided to get married to prove to her parents she was an adult. Her boyfriend wasn't eager but didn't refuse. They married without a grand celebration, with Belinda wearing her sister's white dress and spending the day with friends drinking champagne. The next day, she moved in with him at his parents' place. The marriage was mainly to stop her mom's criticism and gain independence. But not 6 months later, Marshall began to spend little time at home, saying he was working late, but was actually with another woman. Belinda found out when she noticed that her husband was acting strangely one day. She waited until his workday was over and followed her husband, and that's when it all came to light. Marshall was walking hand in hand with some strange woman, most likely with his colleague. Belinda didn't start any arguments or jealousy, she just packed her things and went back to her mother. Marshall kept trying to ask for Belinda's forgiveness, but she wouldn't budge. After that, they soon divorced. In 1987, Belinda had nothing to keep her in her hometown, so she decided to follow her sister to Stephen F. Austin State University. Her time at the university was a positive experience for Belinda. It seemed that she had found her purpose. In addition to studying, Belinda also worked part-time as a basketball coach, and the young girl had very high expectations. At the same university, Belinda met David Temple. Like Belinda, he was also a part-time coach, but in soccer, and he was also a member of the university soccer team as captain. For David, soccer was an integral part of life. He had started practicing soccer since he was a child, and from that time on it was clear that he had the potential to become a star at school. He often played soccer very successfully for the team and was respected by all the teachers, despite his unpleasant personality. David can easily insult or even hit someone, but he gets away with it easily when he is on the field during a match. He often starts the match in a heated situation and then takes a long time to calm down. One of David's teammates said that he has an aggressive nature because of his steroid use. However, in their relationship, David acts completely differently from Belinda. He becomes a caring person and loves her very much. As soon as someone smiles at Belinda, David becomes jealous and tries to clarify his relationship. Belinda met David's family and they were impressed with her. They thought that Belinda and David had a lot in common. But Belinda's sister was not happy about the relationship. They knew Belinda as a strong-willed and independent person before, but as the relationship began, they noticed a change in her. Belinda became withdrawn, quiet and modest, and her life seemed to revolve around pleasing David. Belinda also began to distance herself from her family. She called her parents less often and stopped visiting home as she used to. This was a worrying sign in a toxic relationship. However, David and Belinda continued their relationship. They bought a bull terrier and named him Shaq. After graduating from college, they decided to get married. In January 1999, David and Belinda Temple were expecting their second child. Belinda was nearing her due date, and doctors predicted that she would go into labor in a few weeks. As a pregnant mother, Belinda often felt tired and fatigued. She also had to care for her son Evan. To give his wife some rest, David decided to take Evan for a walk in the park that evening. They walked in the fresh air, but soon felt tired and hungry. They then went to a restaurant for a bite to eat. When they got home, David was shocked to find the front door of his house broken. To keep Evan safe, David quickly took his son to a friend's house who lived nearby, and when his son asked why he couldn't come home, David lied and said his mother was in the hospital. One of David's neighbors, Quentin Harland, had just opened the door to the unexpected visitor, David. He carried his son straight into the living room and quickly returned to the house. Quentin was confused by this and yelled for his wife to watch the child and ran after David. He asked David, "What's going on?" But when he saw the broken front door of the Temple house, Quentin realized that David probably had no idea what was waiting for him inside. When he entered the house, Quentin saw a horrible scene. Everything was in ruins, the cabinets were open, furniture was scattered on the floor, and especially there were blood stains on the floor leading to the stairs. Quentin quickly pushed David aside and saw under the stairs, in the dressing room, Belinda lying face down with her arms outstretched in a large hole in the back of her head. David seemed too shocked to say anything or rush to his wife's body. He took out his cell phone and called the police. Police immediately rushed to the scene but did not enter the house immediately because the Temple family's dog, Shaq, was aggressive. The dog growled and barked at the uniformed officers, prompting one of them to draw his gun. However, the situation was calmed when David Temple came out of the house, then led the dog into the garage. When the officers entered the house, they investigated the scene and concluded that it appeared that a robbery had occurred. They speculated that the burglars did not know that the homeowner was in the house at the time, so they shot her to avoid exposing witnesses. The police began investigating the crime scene. They wondered how the burglar could have entered a house guarded by a ferocious bull terrier. They began to investigate carefully. At the main entrance, the police found broken glass. But this glass was not broken by someone trying to unlock it from the inside, as the glass fragments would have been concentrated near the threshold. Instead, the glass fragments were located far from the door, to the right of the entrance. This indicated that the main door was unlocked and the glass was broken, and it was unclear why the burglar did so. The police opened a box on the nightstand in the living room and found several pieces of jewelry that appeared to be gold. It was unclear why the burglar did not take these pieces of jewelry. The more they investigated, the more suspicious the police became that something was not right around the case. The police's experience with robberies had taught them that the criminal would usually take whatever was valuable and could be found. But in this case, nothing seemed to have been taken. And the fact that the dog was still in their minds was a big deal. Something was wrong with the case. In the murder, the wound suggested the victim had been shot in the back of the head. It is likely that the weapon used was a 12-gauge shotgun, since the victim was kneeling with his back to the killer. But shotguns were uncommon in robberies and were difficult to carry or transport without being detected, which made the police even more suspicious. In the murder of Belinda, it happened at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. A typical criminal would not dare go out with a shotgun in the daytime. David mentioned that he owned a few rifles. However, when the police came to search, the handgun involved in the case was not among the weapons that David had reported. The police asked David to come to the police station to file a report and confess the stolen items. Although worried, David agreed to participate. Police began investigating Belinda's relationships. A young boy named Riley Joe Sanders came to the attention of the police. Riley is a student of Belinda's at school. He has an explosive personality and is especially fond of skipping school. Belinda was not one of those teachers who turned a blind eye to student absenteeism. So when she noticed that one of her students, Riley, had been absent from class for months, she immediately reached out to her colleagues. She wanted to know if this was her problem as a teacher or if the boy was a systematic truant. Her colleagues answered that it was not her problem. The boy was brought up in a bad family, and no one cared about him. He appeared at school only rarely. Belinda couldn't leave it at that. That same evening, she visited his mother, who lived nearby, and had a serious talk with her, which later bore fruit. However, it wasn't quite what the young teacher had expected. Riley Joe Sanders came to class. But during a basketball game, when Sanders pushed his opponent and Belinda pointed out Riley's disgusting behavior, he insulted her with the last words and even said something like, "You'll answer to me for this, you better look around, especially in the evenings." Riley had no explanation for where he was on the day of the murder and had also threatened Belinda. He was brought in for questioning. His father had a .12 caliber gun, but when the police searched the house, they did not find a weapon. When Riley realized that the police suspected him, he confessed that he had been with friends on the day of the murder. He had kept quiet because he had been in a large group and did not want to hurt anyone. The charges against Riley were dropped. Beside that, the police began questioning Quentin Harland. David and Quentin were not only neighbors but also co-workers at the same school. They had a close friendship and often met outside of work to watch sports on TV or attend family barbecues. One day, David and Quentin discovered a new young teacher at the school named Heather Scott. Quentin showed special interest in her, even asking her out to dinner, but Quentin's efforts were unsuccessful because Heather declined the invitation. Quentin accidentally discovered a secret relationship between David and another woman. This made Quentin very angry and resentful because David was married and had a son. However, Quentin kept it a secret and did not reveal anything to others. In the work environment, David and this woman seemed to be a happy couple, and many people in the teaching staff had the same impression. However, no one knew that David had another wife named Belinda. Belinda did not suspect that her husband was having an affair. In fact, she even shared with Quentin that she suspected that David was cheating, but Quentin reassured her that David was a good man and could not do such a thing. However, the way David treated Belinda also changed over time. In the past, he was very respectful and loving towards her. But now he often insulted and hurt her. He called her fat, even though she had only gained a little weight after giving birth. He also often asked her to go to another room when there were guests in the house, as if she did not deserve to be with everyone. Belinda felt extremely unhappy and lonely when faced with this treatment from David. She did not dare to talk seriously with him about this, but cried at night and felt bad about herself. Meanwhile, David was in a very happy new romantic relationship with Heather. David increasingly distant from his family. The psychological pressure he put on his wife was increasing. Although he never raised a hand to hit her, their interactions consisted almost exclusively of insults. At this time, Belinda learned that she was pregnant. When she received this news, she forgot all of David's previous mistakes and felt very happy. It seemed that David also tried to present himself as a happy father, but he was unsuccessful. Sometimes David did not come home at night, and Belinda was afraid to ask him why he was absent at night. She was afraid that her husband might become very angry and cause a scandal. Therefore, Belinda often had to do everything herself while preparing for the birth of the child. She went shopping, painted the walls herself, and assembled the furniture she had bought. David seemed unconcerned and made no effort to help his wife. Belinda prepared everything for the upcoming baby herself, while David seemed to be only concerned with his new relationship. Christmas was approaching, and Belinda was 8 months pregnant. She decided to discuss with her husband David what gifts they would give each other for the occasion. However, David suggested that they skip giving each other gifts this year. He thought it would be better if they used their savings for the upcoming baby, as the doctors had warned that she might go into labor early, and the baby might be born before the new year. When Christmas came, although they had agreed not to give each other gifts, David did not give Belinda any small gifts. Instead, he suddenly packed his things and said that he would spend the New Year holiday hunting with his friends. Belinda felt disappointed and shared the situation with her sister. Her sister decided to help Belinda feel less alone. She also wanted to be there to care for Belinda, as doctors had warned that labor could start at any moment. What Belinda did not know, however, was that David had not gone hunting with his friends. Instead, he had spent the holiday with Heather, who was wearing a gold necklace that was said to have been a Christmas gift from David. After the death of Belinda Temple, David remarried Heather in 2001 and they had a son, Evan. But in November 2004, David's peace was shattered when the police came knocking on his door and arrested him on suspicion of murdering his ex-wife. David continued to deny any guilt. Investigators discovered that his new relationship with Heather may have been the motive for the crime. David's co-workers said that when Belinda became pregnant, David often bragged that he had found a younger, more beautiful woman to replace his wife. According to the prosecution's report, David killed Belinda as soon as she got home, still wearing her uniform and work boots. He then staged the crime scene to look like a robbery by making a mess of the house and quickly taking his son to the park to create an alibi. The prosecution also added that nothing was stolen from the house, and there was a vicious dog in the yard that would not let any stranger in. The murder weapon was probably dropped by David in the rice paddy, as witnesses saw David's car stop near the paddy, with only Evan in the car at the time. However, the shotgun was never recovered in that area. Heather's testimony claimed that before Belinda's murder, her relationship with David was not serious, and she did not even love him. These words certainly did not please Temple and introduced confusion into the jury's decision. Could David kill his wife for a non-serious relationship? Or was Heather lying to save her husband? It wasn't until 2023 that the case was revisited. David was found guilty after all and was sentenced to life in prison with parole after 17 years. His son Evan, while the trial was ongoing, did not believe that his father was capable of such a cold-blooded murder and supported him until the last moment. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samadhi Fonseca Fernandez. Samadhi was born in Costa Rica in February 1975. Information about her family and childhood is limited. She grew up in the Cuban with her mother, Sonia Fonseca. From a young age, Samadhi attended a local school and showed a complex personality. Samadhi stood out for her beauty and knew how to take advantage of her appearance. However, due to her ambition and vanity, she put material and personal interests first, disappointing many people. She was also very jealous and aggressive when she was young. Thanks to her doll-like appearance, Samadhi Fonseca worked for many years as a Barbie in a large bookstore of the Universal Company. The nickname Barbie stuck with her ever since. After graduating from high school, Samadi began a relationship with Osvaldo Fernando Belier, a successful journalist working for a local television station. Osvaldo was 16 years older than Samadi. This was Samadi's longest and most serious relationship, but Osvaldo never proposed to her. In 1996, they had a son, Christopher, and a year later, a daughter, Christina, was born. Due to scandals and jealousy, Samadi and Osvaldo divorced in 2012. In 2013, Osvaldo died at the age of 53 without leaving a will for Samadi. Not accepting this, Samadi decided to take matters into her own hands. She went to Osvaldo's old house, occupied it, and changed the locks to prevent his family and heirs from entering. In addition to seizing the property, Samadi also took some of Osvaldo's valuables. Osvaldo's family was extremely angry and immediately sued Samadi for theft. The police forced Samadi to leave the house, but no criminal proceedings were initiated against her. Samadi had several relationships, most notably with Miguel Angel Perez, with whom she had a third daughter, Maria. Some sources claim that they were married but divorced after a few years. However, other sources claim that Samadi was not married, but simply gave her youngest daughter her lover's surname without his consent. Many strange events have been discovered. Some Barbie lovers have gone missing or died under mysterious circumstances. However, this has not been noticed for a long time. For example, one of Samadi's lovers went missing after breaking up with her. To this day, this person has not been found. Many suspect Samadi's involvement, but there is no concrete evidence. Another case is Diaco, also Samadi's former lover. He was murdered after breaking up with her. The case looked like a failed robbery. The perpetrator was never caught. Again, people suspected Samadi was involved, but there was no clear evidence. The most famous victim believed to be linked to Samadi was Gerardo Cruz. Gerardo Cruz, a Costa Rican native, was born in December 1992 in San Jose. He did not know his biological father because he left the family before he was born. Gerardo's mother, Ana Patricia, later married a man named Hermes Rodriguez. Hermes adopted Gerardo and loved him as his own son. A few years later, Gerardo had a younger sister named Milena. His childhood and youth were quite peaceful. He attended a normal school, loved motorbikes, and soon found true love with a girl named Carol. At the age of 23, Gerardo, his wife and 4-year-old daughter Genesis Cruz moved to live with his aunt and uncle in the suburbs of San Sebastian. He worked at a local bakery to support his family. Gerardo and Carol was happy and were expecting a second child. In the summer of 2015, Gerardo met Samadi, a regular customer at the bakery. Samadi was 40 years old but still attractive, liked to dress provocatively and flirt with men. Notably, she started having affairs with much younger men, probably because she enjoyed the attention they received. Despite the age difference of nearly 20 years, Gerardo quickly became infatuated with this beautiful woman and began dating her secretly. She often came to the bakery, almost every day, to meet her young lover, attracting the attention of other employees. Samadi was often accompanied by his eldest daughter Christina, who was 19 at the time. Initially, Gerardo skillfully balanced his family life with his secret meetings with his mistress. Both women were unaware of each other's existence. However, Gerardo gradually became careless and began telling his friends and colleagues about Samadi, praising her as a great mistress and giving him gifts. Rumors of Gerardo's relationship soon reached his mother, who tried to convince her son to leave his mistress. However, Gerardo and Samadi's relationship only lasted a few months and ended in October 2015, when Samadi discovered that Gerardo had a pregnant wife and a young daughter. Samadi was furious and began calling and texting Gerardo's wife, Carol, insulting her and threatening to kill Gerardo if he did not stay with her. Gerardo begged his wife for forgiveness and wanted to keep the family together. He did not take Samadi's threats seriously, thinking that she would quickly cool down and find a new boyfriend. He did not expect how vengeful Samadi would become. Just a few days after the breakup with Samadi, while walking on a downtown street, Gerardo discovered an older man secretly filming up a young woman's skirt. Gerardo was angry and decided to record the incident with his phone. He then approached the woman, explained the situation and advised her to call the police. Next, he chased the man for about 2 minutes, trying to capture his face. Finally, the man fled in a taxi. That evening, Gerardo posted a video of the incident on his personal website. After just one night, the video went viral online. Netizens quickly identified the elderly man in the video as Luis Solmano Delgado, a former finance ministry official. The video quickly spread across media, turning Gerardo into a national celebrity. He was repeatedly invited to interviews in newspapers, on television and on radio to recount the incident, condemn the former official's actions and affirm that he had no regrets about what he had done. Meanwhile, a team of talented lawyers hired by Luis began to legally attack Gerardo. They accused him of violating the law by distributing the video and were preparing to sue him. Gerardo was surprised and confused by the situation, not knowing why he was being tried instead of the man who had committed a depraved act with an innocent girl. On October 7th, Gerardo gave his final interview on a local radio station. He was confident in his views and did not feel nervous. The next day, Gerardo planned to meet his friend Oswald after work, but canceled, citing an emergency. It was later revealed that Gerardo had received a text message from Samadi that day. In the message, she had lured him to the park that evening with the promise of another interview. Gerardo trusted his ex-girlfriend completely and did not suspect anything. After work, he went to the meeting place, but instead of meeting the journalist, he was attacked by 2 strange men. They robbed him of his bag, beat him and stabbed him several times in the chest and stomach before running away. Before losing consciousness, Gerardo called his friend to tell him the news. The friend immediately called the police and an ambulance. Thanks to timely treatment, Gerardo was taken to the hospital. Doctors tried to save his life for 42 days. During this time, Gerardo underwent many surgeries, but ultimately did not survive. On November 19th, Gerardo passed away in the intensive care unit. Since Gerardo had just become famous before the tragedy, the news of his condition attracted national attention and was not exaggerated. Gerardo's family gave interviews, asking people to pray for his recovery. They did not understand why someone would attack Gerardo. Many people attended the funeral to express their condolences to the family. People hoped that the police would soon catch the culprit and give him a fair trial. There were initially many theories about the case. One theory was that it was a robbery murder, because Gerardo was attacked in the park in the evening, his bag was stolen and he was stabbed with a knife. However, a few days before, Gerardo released a shocking video involving a famous former official, which could be related to the case. Therefore, the second theory was that it was a revenge murder. The media reported that Luis Solmano Delgado may have hired a hitman to kill the young man who had damaged his reputation. The case caused a heated debate in the press and people protested to demand the arrest of the culprit. The police began to investigate various theories and look for Gerardo's enemies. The investigation went dormant for months until May 2016, when a security camera video was discovered. The video showed 2 men running away from the crime scene. They immediately became prime suspects, but the police needed to identify and arrest them. The video became crucial evidence and, when released, helped move the investigation forward. The video was repeatedly shown on the news, urging viewers to look out for dangerous suspects. Police sketched the suspects and their physical features. Not long after, one suspect turned himself in and cooperated with the investigation, hoping for a reduced sentence. Thanks to his information, the investigation quickly identified other accomplices and the masterminds. All those involved were arrested, including Samadi and his daughter Cristina, the masterminds, Ronald Arce Barrientos, the taxi driver, Cesar Chavez Cerdas, who acted as an intermediary, Omar Costa, the young minor who directly participated in the attack and followed the victim. The roles and connections of the participants in the case were determined through phone calls and text messages. Samadi was the mastermind, who planned the entire incident in detail and recruited his daughter Cristina to participate. They asked their friends Ronald and Cesar to find an assassin to kill Gerardo, disguising it as a robbery in the park at night. Omar also participated with the task of ensuring that the victim arrived at the right location. Samadi chose October 7th as the date of the murder. On that day, she contacted all the participants several times, assigning roles and ensuring that everyone followed the plan. The young woman also asked them to bring her some of her ex-lover's belongings as evidence after the crime. Gerardo, after finishing his shift, went straight to the park. He thought he was going to an interview, so he tried to arrive on time. However, at the meeting place, he was attacked and stabbed multiple times. The attacker took Gerardo's handbag and jacket, then gave these to the Samadi as evidence. The most important evidence against Samadi were text messages detailing the murder plan and the roles of each participant. She was so confident that she did not delete these messages. The motive for this serious crime was jealousy. She did not want to share her lover with his wife and decided that if she could not have him, no one could. She carefully planned and executed the criminal conspiracy with the help of her daughter. They were immediately arrested and denied bail due to concerns that they might flee the country. The other co-defendants were also detained before trial, except for Omar, the supervisor, and the youngest participant was handed over to the Juvenile Justice Department. The investigation lasted about a year and a half. It was not until December 2017 that the trial of all those involved in the criminal conspiracy began. Samadi has a criminal record and was once arrested for falsifying documents to receive state benefits, but was only fined. She assigned the surname of a former lover to the child without his consent. She then used the court to receive child support from this man for more than 3 years, until the fraud was discovered. Samadi was sentenced to 3 years in prison and fined a large sum. However, because she has a young child, her sentence was reduced to 5 years of suspended imprisonment. At the trial, the victim Gerardo's wife confirmed that she knew about her husband's relationship with Samadi. She also said that Samadi had threatened to kill Gerardo, but he was not too worried about these threats. The main motive for the case was Samadi's jealousy and hurt, as she could not accept that her young lover wanted to stay with his wife. Through phone records, police discovered that Samadi and her daughter Cristina had planned the crime together. After the security camera footage of the murders was released, Cristina had a mental breakdown. She called her mother in tears and wanted to turn herself in, but Samadi reassured her that the investigation would never lead to them. The verdict was announced on January 23, 2018. The court sentenced Samadi to 30 years in prison, Cristina to 25 years, Ronald to 25 years, and Cesar to 25 years. Of the killers, one was sent to a juvenile detention center, while another was still at large at the time. Omar, who had been stalking the victim, was acquitted. The victim's family received $140,000 in moral compensation. After the trial, they expressed their gratitude to the court for giving Gerardo's killers a fair sentence. Samadi and Cristina's lawyers appealed to the Court of Appeals for a reduced sentence. The appeal hearing took place in November 2019. At the same time, Ronald. According to the testimony, Ronald participated in the massacre but did not know the details of the plan. Ronald and Cesar also appealed in hopes of having their sentences reduced. As a result, each participant in the crime had their sentence reduced by 5 years. Samadhi is currently serving a 25-year sentence in a women's prison in Costa Rica. In the summer of 2020, she registered her marriage to a woman named Lindsay Diaz Lopez, whom she met in prison. At the time of the registration, Lindsay had been pardoned and released from prison, while Samadhi still had to continue serving nearly 2 more decades of her sentence. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Liana Friedenbach. Liana Friedenbach was born in Sao Paulo in May 1987. She grew up in a wealthy family and is the eldest of 2 children. Her father, Henry Friedenbach, is a successful and respected lawyer in the city. Her boyfriend Felipe Cafe, who comes from the same city, was born in July 1984. However, he was raised in a large family with quite difficult economic conditions. Since childhood, he had to work part-time to support himself and help his family. When the two met while still in school, they gradually developed a friendship and then became the first love of their youth. They had to hide their relationship in every possible way. It is worth noting that Liana's parents were religious and raised their daughter strictly. Liana was educated in religious values and participated in religious activities since she was a child, and her parents did not support romantic relationships when she was young. In addition, social inequality also played an important role. Liana came from a wealthy family, but she chose a man from a poor family. The prohibition of her parents did not make the young people give up on each other, but on the contrary, they decided to hide their relationship and secretly date in private places to avoid detection. In the fall of 2003, Liana and Felipe planned a trip to a remote and deserted land. Before starting the trip, they prepared carefully so as not to be discovered by their families. Felipe informed his parents that he was going camping with his friends, while Liana said that she was going to visit a church with her friends. She thought that this reason was convincing enough for her parents to believe her and agree to let her go without further questions. Liana and Felipe's family believed the story the children had created, so Liana and Felipe could enjoy life without worrying about their families finding out. The two were happy to be able to spend a week together. Liana and Felipe decided to go to Uji Guasu province, which had beautiful scenery. They brought with them essentials such as tents, sleeping bags, personal belongings, and some food supplies. However, financial problems caused difficulties for the young couple. As students, they were entitled to free public transportation, so they made detailed plans to get to their destination by bus. On the early morning of October 31st, Liana and Felipe met at the designated location. They kept the meeting a secret for fear of being discovered. First, they took the first bus, then arrived at another city in the evening. Here, they stayed overnight at the bus station. Then, they continued traveling by 2 more buses to reach their desired destination. They then walked a few kilometers to a secluded spot in the forest, where they planned to make a fire and enjoy some private time together. The weather was warm, with a little sunshine, and although a little tired from the long journey, Liana and Felipe were still happy, joking and planning their vacation. As the couple walked through the forest to the abandoned farm where they planned to stay, they caught the eye of a group of locals near a pond. They were Paulo Cesar de Silva Marquez, nicknamed Pernambuco, and Roberto Alves Cardoso, known as Chino. Chino, 16 years old but already the leader of the gang, thought that there was something valuable in the couple's backpack. The robbers stealthily followed the couple and hid deep in the bushes. While Liana and Felipe set up their tent and had a snack, they were unaware that they were being followed. The robbers waited until they were sure that there were only 2 young men and that they were not carrying weapons. Then Pernambuco and Chino attacked Liana and Felipe. The robbers searched all the bags and backpacks, but found nothing of value. The robbers then decided that they could demand ransom from the couple's relatives. Liana, too scared, immediately said that she came from a wealthy family and that her father would give them as much money as they wanted. The robbers were delighted to hear this information. While the plan to extort money was being finalized, the robbers thought about how much money they could extort. To prevent the couple from escaping, the robbers took them to an abandoned house near the farm, but the house had no windows or doors. They then decided to take the couple to the house of a gang member. When the robbers could not find the way to collect the ransom, they tied up and brutally beat Felipe so that he could not escape or resist. Then all the gang members took turns raping Liana. After torturing the two for a while, the next morning, the robbers took the couple to a secluded place in the forest. The robbers led Felipe, who was seriously injured, deep into the forest. Then, there was a gunshot from deep in the forest. Liana realized what had happened and that her lover was no longer alive. The robbers told her that they had released Felipe and that the robbers wanted to keep her, treating her like a toy until they got bored of her. After their daughter left, Liana's parents soon discovered that she had not gone on a church outing with her friends as she had said. Her parents were also unable to contact her friends to find out where she had gone. Liana's family suspected that their daughter might have run away with her boyfriend and decided to contact his parents. And Felipe's family said that their son had gone camping with his friends. So they had no idea where the couple was. The situation became even more complicated because for several days, no one in the family had been able to contact the couple, and their phones had been turned off. Liana's family reported the incident to the police, who then gradually learned about the couple's route after they left home. Through investigation, the police found the last location where the couple left the bus and moved to a deserted dense forest where their phone was last disconnected in Mbukwashu. A large-scale search began with the participation of the police, rescue workers, and people who knew about the incident who decided to help. A large local businessman also joined the search, using his personal helicopter to search from the air and drop leaflets with pictures of Liana and Felipe. After a short time, the couple's camp was found. However, the atmosphere was very tense because they seemed to have been attacked. There were no signs of blood or fighting, but the couple's personal belongings were thrown around. Their tent had been slashed with a knife from top to bottom. While searching the scene, the rescuers found Felipe's mobile phone. But the most terrifying thing was that they soon discovered Felipe's body. The tied-up man had been shot in the back of the head, at close range. It was clear that the chances of finding Liana alive were slim, but the rescue team and everyone continued to search, hoping that Liana was still alive. Liana's father contacted the press to let everyone know about the incident. A large reward had been announced for any information on Liana's whereabouts, but still no leads. After shooting Felipe dead, the robbers took Liana back to the house where they had previously held them both. Here, the robbers, who had been invited by their accomplices Pernambuco and Chino, joined them. Chino declared that Liana belonged to him, and he could do whatever he wanted with her. He invited everyone to do whatever they wanted with Liana, and his invitation was accepted immediately. The next day, when they learned of the large-scale search operation, the criminals decided to move to another location to cover their tracks. They moved Liana to the house of Anthony Matias de Barros, a member of the gang. That night, the robbers went fishing and Liana went with them. Chino put his coat on Liana because it was cold and he wanted to show her that he cared. To his surprise, Chino's brother also arrived. Chino told his brother that Liana was his lover, and his brother immediately realized that Liana was the one the police were looking for. Chino's brother took Chino aside and warned him that the police were looking for Liana. Chino decided that he had to get rid of Liana. He lied to Liana, telling her that she was free and that he would lead her out into the street. But in reality, Chino led Liana into the woods. There, he brutally murdered Liana with a knife and then smashed her head with a rock to make sure she was dead. Liana's body was found 5 days after the massacre. Liana was wearing the killer's jacket, which later became one of the key pieces of evidence. The robbers managed to flee without destroying the physical evidence. This naive confidence of the robbers helped the police quickly identify them and arrest all the members of the criminal gang. Chino left his jacket on the victim's body, which had traces of his sweat on it. In addition, he took the murder weapon home. He tried to wash the clothes with traces of Liana's blood so that he could continue to wear them. According to the results of DNA analysis, the police identified the members of the gang who tortured Liana. Chino not only did not deny it, but immediately testified, boasting that he had kidnapped, abused, and then killed the unfortunate victim. Chino describes in detail everything that happened to Liana in her final days. After a lengthy trial, most of the adult members of the gang received quite harsh sentences. Pernambuco was sentenced to life in prison for Felipe's murder. Antonio Geno da Silva, as well as Agnaldo Paes, also received life sentences. But Anthony Matias de Barros was sentenced to only 6 years in prison because he himself did not torture Liana but only provided the gang with his house, where everything took place. However, the gang leader, Chino, was only 16 years old at the time of the crime. For this reason, Chino was sent to a specialized juvenile prison with a fairly lenient regime. Chino made several escapes, behaved aggressively, and was unpredictable, so he was assigned to undergo psychological testing. Chino was found to have some mental abnormalities, which had terrible consequences, turning him into a sadist and murderer without any feelings of pity or remorse. After being diagnosed as such, Chino was transferred to a medical facility where he underwent mandatory treatment and rehabilitation. No punishment was imposed on him. Chino has a better life than before his crime. He now has his own room with a large TV, internet access, and a comfortable bed with an orthopedic mattress. He is fed 4 balanced meals a day with a customized menu, which is part of the policy of the medical facility where he is detained. Chino's monthly living expenses are estimated at $1,200, which is about $2,500. In recent years, Chino has regularly applied for release, noting that he has undergone all of his treatment and no longer poses any threat to others, which means he can return to his normal life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michaela Garrecht. Sharon Murch and her husband, Rod Garrecht, had been trying to have a child for 5 years. After numerous visits to doctors and fertility treatments, they were overjoyed when their daughter Michaela Garrecht was born on January 24, 1979, in Oakland, California. Her parents affectionately referred to her as their miracle child due to the difficulties they faced in conceiving her. After that, their family soon welcomed 2 new members, a daughter named Libby and a son named Alex. In 1986, the family relocated to Hayward, where they settled down, established their home, and raised their children. As a child, Michaela was known for being intelligent, lively, and well-behaved. She listened attentively to her parents and followed their advice closely. Sharon was a caring and attentive mother. Sometimes it makes others feel like she's being overprotective of her children. Given the rise in child abductions in California during the 1980s, her caution was understandable. As a result, she always kept her children close to home and ensured they were never far from adult supervision. On Saturday, November 19, 1988, Michaela finished breakfast with her family. Her best friend, 9-year-old Katrina Rodriguez, stopped by to ask if Michaela could accompany her to the local grocery store to buy snacks. Initially, Sharon, Michaela's mother, refused permission. However, Michaela persisted, assuring her mother that they would be safe and return quickly. Eventually, Sharon relented and gave her permission to go with you. As a precaution, Sharon reminded they to be careful. She gave Michaela $5, then the girls eagerly grabbed their scooters and left. Before leaving, Michaela expressed her love for her mother. As Sharon watched them leave, her husband Rod decided to go outside and work on the car. Meanwhile, Sharon headed back inside to clean up the breakfast dishes. Unbeknownst to her, the next few minutes would alter her life forever. Michaela and Katrina eagerly rode their scooters to the Rainbow Market on Mission Boulevard and parked them right outside the store. The girls then entered the market to buy some snacks. They purchased 2 Mountain Dew sodas, 2 beef jerky sticks, and 2 cherry toffees before exiting the store. Engrossed in a conversation about their holiday plans, they completely forgot about their scooters. As they were about to leave the parking lot, they suddenly remembered their scooters were still outside. To their surprise, the scooters was missing. The girls decided to split up and search for it. Michaela spotted the scooter first. It had been moved about 3 parking spaces away and was now standing beside a car. Without hesitation, Michaela rushed over to the scooter and bent down to grab the handlebars. In a rapid and unexpected turn of events, a man leapt from the car and grabbed Michaela around her waist. He then forcefully pushed her into the back seat. Witnessing the shocking scene unfold, Katrina momentarily froze, her eyes fixed on the chaotic scene as her friend struggled to break free from the abductor's grasp. The car sped away from the parking space, accelerating down Mission Boulevard toward Union City. Regaining her composure, Katrina rushed back into the store and alerted the cashier, Rona Ranilan, about the kidnapping. Rona quickly called the local police, and they were quickly present at the crime scene. Additionally, Rona also contacted Katrina's father and told them what had just happened to their daughter. Sharon was doing the dishes at home when she heard a frantic shout from outside. Her husband, Rod, burst through the front door, telling her that Michaela had just been kidnapped outside the Rainbow Market. Along with Katrina's father, they rushed to the store and found police everywhere, questioning customers and staff. Katrina was extremely upset and was allowed to go home with her father. Rod and Sharon stayed behind, hoping to get some information about what had happened. However, as Sharon waited anxiously, she couldn't shake off a growing sense of fear. Sharon recalled a poem written by Michaela. She also remembered an incident from the week before that had left her unsettled. Specifically, Sharon had woken up early one morning to find Michaela sitting at the breakfast table, writing in the early hours. Michaela's mother asked her what she was working on, and Michaela vaguely replied that she was writing a poem. Sharon asking repeatedly what the poem was about. Michaela finally explained that her poem was inspired by the noises she had heard coming from the attic that morning. She had been thinking about people who were kidnapped and being held captive, and her poem was about their experiences. She explained that the poem actually referred to individuals who were being detained against their will, rather than those who had been kidnapped and murdered. Sharon found Michaela's poem to be disturbing and out of character, as her daughter was typically a happy person. In hindsight, Sharon believes that Michaela may have written the poem as a kind of prophecy or premonition. The police were provided with a description of the man who allegedly kidnapped Michaela. Rona, a cashier, told them that the suspect was a white male in his 30s with a mustache. She also reported that he drove a car that was either burgundy or maroon in color, but was unable to provide details about the make or model. According to Rona, the man had parked his car and gotten out, but instead of entering the store, he looked through the window, observing the girls and other customers without entering. She suspected he might be planning to rob the store. A sketch artist created a composite picture, then distributed to local police stations and news outlets. The investigators found the scooter used in the abduction and collected it as evidence. They obtained a handprint from the scooter handle, which was added to their database to identify the kidnapper. But it did not lead to any leads. The day after the kidnapping, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, joined the investigation, they suspecting a relevance between a series of local child kidnappings, but this was ultimately not confirmed. Police soon realized that Katrina could provide more information about the suspect since she was the main witness to the abduction. 2 days after the incident, investigators visited her home. They spoke with her and her parents, and the information she provided shocked them. Her description of the kidnapper greatly differed from the one provided by the store cashier. Katrina described him as a young white male in his early 20s with dirty blonde hair, severe acne scarring, and blue eyes. Katrina vividly recalled the suspect's eyes, describing them to investigators as fox eyes. She explained that despite his look straight at her, but he didn't seem to recognize her. Additionally, she told investigators that the suspect's car was beige or tan in color, box-shaped, and had noticeable body damage. The new description raises concerns as it means the crucial 48 hours to find a suspect has been wasted on finding the wrong person. Investigators reprinted posters with the new suspect's description and redistributed them throughout the area. Armed with this fresh information, they began visiting local sex offenders, inquiring about potential leads. A large number of volunteers joined, going door to door and distributing posters that detailed Michaela's clothing: a white Metro t-shirt, rolled-up blue denim jeans, black Mary Jane shoes, and pearl-colored feather-shaped earrings. After searching the nearby suburbs but finding no sign of Michaela, police expanded their search, include the Garin National Park and Niles Canyon, which are just a short distance from the She home. This decision was prompted by a tip from 3 hikers, who claimed to have found footprints in the forest area, belonging to 1 adult and 1 child. Upon following the tracks, the hikers discovered a blanket and empty fast food containers. A psychological analysis of the kidnapper suggested they would likely take Michaela to a secluded location. To aid in the search, helicopters were equipped with infrared thermal cameras to detect heat signatures in the dense wooded areas. Police officers also combed the area on horseback and on foot, but these efforts did not produce any results. Unfortunately, Michaela and her kidnapper seemed to have vanished without a trace. The search for Michaela made national headlines, and her case was featured on prominent television programs such as Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted. Her photo was also distributed on milk cartons, and the Missing Children's program sent over 50 million mailing cards to homes across the country. These cards included a picture of Michaela, a description of her clothing, and a composite sketch of the kidnapper. San Francisco 49ers quarterback Joe Montana publicly showed his support for the Michaela family and urged the public to come forward with any information. A $70,000 reward was offered for any information related to Michaela's disappearance. Within the first year, the police received over 5,000 tips, the majority of which were unfounded rumors. Despite this, the community remained dedicated to finding Michaela. Sharon conducted her own investigation and found some clues, some taking her as far as Russia, but none produced any results. A significant break in the case occurred between 1991 and 1992, when an inmate in Indiana provided authorities with crucial information regarding Michaela's disappearance. Roger Haggard, who was serving an 11-year sentence for burglary, claimed to have helped a friend bury Michaela's body in a gladiolus field in Union City. At first, the investigators were skeptical and did not think his claims were credible enough to be investigated further. Undeterred, Roger decided to reach out to the media for help. In 1992, he wrote a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, stating that he knew who had kidnapped Michaela and where her body was buried. He offered to lead investigators to the location. Hen investigators brought Roger to California to testify before a grand jury. Roger repeated his earlier claims under oath, promised to lead investigators to Michaela's burial site and the home of her killer. The next day, a team of investigators accompanied Roger to the field where he claimed Michaela's body was buried. After 8 hours of searching, Roger confessed that his claim was false. He explained that his intention was to provide the Michaela family a sense of peace after all these years. This confession had even more serious consequences for Roger. He was charged with perjury and received an additional 6 years prison sentence, along with an order to pay $6,000 in damages to Michaela's family for giving them false hope. This development would not be the only one to shake the investigation. Authorities also kept an eye on another individual, Lawrence Binder, 43, a wastewater treatment plant worker. He appeared to be a normal man, married with a family. However, suspicions were raised when investigators received a tip from East Bay Area parents about his disturbing behavior. These parents claimed that he had been sending gifts and money to young girls in an attempt to befriend them. What's more, some of the letters he wrote were written in reverse, requiring the recipient to use a mirror to decipher their meaning. As investigators dug deeper into Lawrence's past, they found that he drove a distinctive light blue van with the license plate, "Love You." The interior of the van was peculiarly decorated with photos of small children, children's drawings, and biblical verses. Furthermore, Lawrence had a previous arrest record for attempting to lure 2 young girls into his van, although the charges were eventually dropped. Lawrence often inserted himself into investigations of missing children. For instance, following the 1988 disappearance of Michaela, he reached out to her mother, Sharon. He also contacted Kim Schwartz, the mother of 7-year-old Amber Schwartz, who went missing in June 1988. In both cases, the mothers eventually told the police that they felt uneasy about Lawrence's persistence in contacting them and trying to stay updated on the developments in their daughters' cases. After uncovering a series of unusual circumstances, the investigation led authorities to suspect Lawrence of being involved in a series of child abductions. When Amber went missing, Lawrence wrote to the police predicting the next victim would be a 9-year-old girl. This proved true when Michaela missing. Lawrence further raised suspicions when he sending a Christmas card with a picture of a girl holding up 4 fingers to an FBI profiler. This incident took on a more ominous tone when 4-year-old Amanda Campbell went missing on December 27, 1991. Lawrence was also linked to the disappearance of Eileen Mischelhoff, a 13-year-old girl from Dublin, California. As Lawrence's name became associated with the string of child abductions, he found himself under intense media scrutiny. His unusual behavior and fascination with the cases sparked widespread public interest, leading many people to suspect he was involved. As a result, Lawrence and his family faced harassment and public backlash. However, after Lawrence sued the city of Fairfield for defamation and won, investigators began to reassess his role in the case. It became clear that he was not as involved as initially thought, and many believed he was simply trying to insert himself into the investigation. Despite the mystery surrounding Lawrence, the case remained a complex challenge for investigators. In addition, there is a new suspect, Curtis Dean Anderson. He was arrested in August 2000 and subsequently linked to a series of heinous crimes. After his arrest, Anderson confessed to the 1999 abduction and murder of 7-year-old Ziana Fairchild from Vallejo, California. During a 2007 FBI interview, Anderson made a shocking claim: he had murdered 13 additional women and girls. He also admitted to abducting and killing 7-year-old Amber Schwartz, whom he had seen standing on a street corner. However, Curtis's life ended abruptly on December 9, 2007, when he died due to kidney and liver failure. This untimely death prevented investigators from gathering more information about Curtis's past crimes. Following his confession, investigators looked into Curtis's background and found a coincidence. In 1989, he was pulled over in a brown 1977 Chevy sedan, matched the vehicle description given by a witness named Katrina. Despite Curtis's death, his confession reignited interest in a more notorious case, the kidnapping of Michaela. The renewed investigation brought new attention and generated fresh leads. However, a new development in August 2012 shed more light on the case. Wesley Sherman Teen, one half of the Notorious Speed Freaks duo, reached out to the Stockton Record after his accomplice, Loren Herzog, took his own life in January that year. Wesley pointed out that Loren was to bear an uncanny resemblance to the suspect's composite in Michaela's case. The resemblance between Loren and the kidnapper is further confirmed by Katrina's observations, which indicate that Loren shares very similar characteristics to Michaela's kidnapper. Following a lead from Wesley, investigators began excavating a well in Linden, California, where him and Loren was believed to have disposed of Michaela's remains. The excavation uncovered thousands of bone fragments, some likely belonging to Michaela. Although investigators never lost hope of solving the case, the mystery continued to baffle them. It wasn't until 8 years later that a useful clue finally emerged. The circumstances surrounding Michaela's disappearance were horrifying and had a profound impact on the public. However, more shocking revelations were yet to come. On December 21, 2020, the Hayward Police Department and FBI made a significant announcement in the Michaela case, revealing a surprising development. Despite initial suspicions focusing on Loren and Wesley, but then investigators charged 61 years old David Garrick with Michaela's kidnapping and murder. Advances in technology played a crucial role in solving the case, by linking David's fingerprints to those found on Michaela's scooter 32 years earlier, in 1988. David Misch has been charged with the murder of Michaela and is currently in custody at Santa Rita Jail in Alameda County. An examination of David's past reveals a disturbing pattern of crime that dates back to his teenage years. Born on February 19, 1961, in Chicago, Illinois, little is known about David's upbringing. However, by the age of 16, he had already become involved in criminal activities. In 1977, he was convicted of breaking into a house, where he sexually assaulted a maid at knife point. He was arrested and sentenced but was paroled just a year later, in 1978. David's troubles with the law continued. In February 1979, he was arrested for charges of false imprisonment and assault with a deadly weapon, which were later updated to assault with intent to rape. Despite this, he became eligible for parole in September 1981. Years later, in May 1988, David was arrested for burglary at a San Leandro grocery store. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison and 1 year of probation. In November of the same year, he was released from custody after 6 months. However, his luck eventually ran out in December 1988. That year, a tragic incident happened to his longtime friend Margaret Ball, who was 38 years old. She often helped him in times of need, but the nature of their relationship took a drastic turn. Margaret's dead body was discovered by her stepdaughter in a pool of blood, brutally beaten and stabbed. The crime scene was particularly gruesome, with Margaret's front tooth found a few feet away from her body due to the severity of the beating. The police were led to David as the primary suspect after discovering evidence linking him to the crime. He was arrested and eventually convicted of Margaret's murder. While David was already serving time for Margaret's murder, new evidence led to additional charges against him. In 2018, he was sentenced to 18 years to life for Margaret's murder. A DNA analysis later implicated David in 2 murders that occurred in Fremont, California, in 1986. 2 young women, Michelle Xavier, 18, and her best friend, Jennifer Dewey, 20, had gone out to celebrate a family member's birthday dinner on February 2, 1986. After leaving the restaurant, they stopped at a convenience store. However, shortly after midnight, their bodies were found on the side of the road by a motorcyclist. The scene revealed a disturbing and violent crime. The women were stripped naked, they had been stabbed and shot. An autopsy later revealed that they had also been sexually assaulted. The car Michelle was driving was discovered 6 miles away from the crime scene in a grocery store parking lot. Michaela's case was forgotten for many years due to lack of clues and information. However, 32 years later, advances in DNA technology led detectives to a suspect, David Garrick. He is currently serving time, faces additional charges, including 3 counts of murder and 1 count of abduction, which could result in the death penalty. Chief Hayward vowed to continue the search for Michaela's body and remains hopeful that she will be found. Michaela's father, Rod Garrick, traveled over 100 miles to attend a recent press conference. He expressed a sense of relief knowing that the police have caught suspect. The authorities have a suspect to question, and hopefully, this person will provide information about Michaela's whereabouts. Sharon, Michaela's mother, was unable to attend a press conference due to her ongoing battle with metastatic cancer. Police Chief Hayward read a statement on her behalf, which revealed her struggle to accept the reality of her daughter's fate. In the past year, she had to accept the likelihood that Michaela was no longer alive. However, she found comfort in imagining her in a peaceful afterlife, sitting on clouds, walking on golden streets, dancing on hills, and soaring among the stars. Bernie Castillo, the attorney for David, has been vocal about the case and strongly criticizes the investigation methods used to charge his client. He dismisses the evidence as junk science and finds it implausible that a handprint match was suddenly found after 32 years. Bernie believes the police are trying to pin the blame solely on David as a convenient way to close the case. Meanwhile, Katrina, Michaela's close friend and witness to the case, has been carrying guilt over, still remembers the tragic incident that occurred that Saturday morning. She feels that it should have been her, as the scooter that was moved belonged to her. This burden of guilt has caused Katrina to suppress memories of her childhood. In contrast, Sharon, Michaela's mother, dedicated her life to finding her daughter. Initially, she waited anxiously for news at the telephone and later turned to the internet for answers. However, after David was charged with Michaela's murder, Sharon's fight for justice began to fade due to her cancer diagnosis. She eventually passed away in May 2022, finding solace in the fact that she would soon be reunited with her daughter. A new twist has arisen in the complicated case of David, who is currently awaiting trial for his alleged involvement in the kidnapping and murder of Michaela, as well as the murders of Michelle and Jennifer. The search for justice for Michaela has been going on for decades, but may now face a significant obstacle. It seems David, the suspect, might not face the full severity of the punishment for the allegations against him. In contrast, David's defense attorney, Ernie, viewed the news as validation, stating that each case against David relies on questionable forensic tactics. Bernie was not surprised by the decision, as it confirms his long-held belief that the prosecution's case has significant weaknesses. Others, however, disagree with the decision. Chuck Euler, a retired lieutenant who worked on another case involving David, believed he should receive the maximum sentence for his crimes. David is currently awaiting trial for 3 counts of murder and 1 count of kidnapping. His case is closely tied to the mysterious disappearance of Michaela, a story filled with unexpected twists and turns. However, the investigation was marred by an initial case of mistaken identity, leading police to waste valuable time in the first 2 days. As a result, Michaela's family was left searching for answers for decades. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Alison Bonilla. Alison Pamela Bonilla Vasquez was born on November 7, 2001, in Cartago, Costa Rica. She is an only child, living with her mother Yendrai Vasquez. In addition to her mother, her grandparents Ramon and Marjorie, and her aunt Samara also helped raise Alison. Alison's father left the family shortly after her birth. He chose to be with another woman who was pregnant. He did not want to play a role in Alison's life. Only once, when he was diagnosed with lung cancer, did he ask to see his daughter, and Yendrai allowed him to. It is worth noting that his second family did not know about Allison's existence. Allison and her mother, Yendrai, had a particularly close relationship. For Allison, Yendrai was not only a mother but also a father. Therefore, Allison often gave her mother gifts on Father's Day. Their relationship went beyond the typical mother-daughter relationship. Allison felt comfortable sharing everything with Yendrai without fear of being misunderstood or judged. Despite not having a father, Allison did not feel lonely or abandoned. She had a large family and enjoyed spending time with them. She also attended church regularly every Sunday. Relatives described Allison as a kind, outgoing, and friendly girl. In photos, she always looked happy, and there was no sign of sadness or longing in her eyes. Allison had always dreamed of becoming a model. She decided to drop out of 8th grade to focus on makeup classes, thinking that combining the two was too difficult. She did not want to waste time on something that would not help her achieve her goals. After that, Allison started looking for a job to help her mother pay the bills but did not receive any responses from the places she applied. This made her very sad. Her mother, Yendrai, realized that her daughter would have difficulty finding a job due to her limited education, so she encouraged Allison to take evening classes. At age 18, Allison enrolled in Liceo Enrique Geyer, a few miles from home. During this time, she completed a pastry course and began practicing. Allison made delicious cakes and desserts that were loved by everyone in the neighborhood. This helped her find a way to make money from her baking talent. Allison had a boyfriend named Harold Sura Solano who lived in Cachi, a district in the province of Cartago, Costa Rica. Usually, Allison stayed home with her mother in the morning, then met Harold, and then went to evening school at 6 o'clock. She often returned home late by bus. The route from the bus stop to her house was dangerous, dark, and deserted. Therefore, Allison always informed her mother of her location, and sometimes her mother picked her up at the bus stop or halfway. On March 4, 2020, Allison went to her mother's nail salon, then visited her classmate pal for about 15 minutes. They arrived at school at 6 p.m. and separated because they had different classes. Allison arrived at school and waited in an empty classroom for about 15 minutes before realizing that her classes had been canceled for the day. Instead of going home right away, she decided to visit her aunt who lived near the school. However, her aunt was not home. Allison then decided to go to her boyfriend Harold's house. When she arrived, she learned that Harold was at work but would be back soon. Harold's mother invited Allison inside to wait. When Harold returned, the family had dinner together, talking about a variety of topics and discussing future plans. After dinner, Harold excused himself for a moment, saying that he had urgent business to attend to but would be back soon. At 8:15 p.m., Allison left Harold's house without waiting for him to return. This set off a chain of events that would become nationally known. Harold returned home about 5 minutes later and, seeing that Allison had left, texted her to ask where she was and offered to give her a ride home on his bike. Allison replied immediately that she had already arrived at the bus stop. While waiting for the bus, she texted her friend Pa to ask if Pa's cousin could give her a ride home on his bike. However, Pa's cousin refused because his bike was a special type and not suitable for two people. It is unclear why Allison did not ask her boyfriend for help. She may have been angry with him or did not want to bother him. Allison got off the bus at 8:43 p.m. Her house was about a mile away. Feeling anxious and scared, she texted her mother to pick her up. At 8:45 p.m., Allison texted her boyfriend and mother that two suspicious men had gotten out of a car and were following her. She decided to run home to avoid them. The road Allison was on was dangerous, poorly lit, and had few people. There was only one security camera there, which captured a blurry image that could have been Allison. Allison's mother, Yendrai, went to the bridge half a mile from their home to pick up her daughter but did not see her. She tried to stay calm, thinking that Allison might have gone back to the bus stop for safety. However, she did not find her there either. She finally thought that Allison had not seen her and had gone home on her own. When Yendrai returned home, she found that Allison was not there. She immediately called relatives and friends to ask for help in the search. About 30 minutes later, Harold woke up and received a call from his Aunt Samara saying Allison was missing. He tried to contact Yendrai but was unsuccessful. 3 hours later, Yendrai reported Allison missing to the police, and the search began. Luckily, Yendrai had the last photo of Allison in the clothes she was wearing. Police checked several locations, from the bus stop to Allison's house, Katchi Lake, and the nearby hydroelectric dam. On March 5, 2020, police found their first clue, Allison's glasses in the grass about a mile from her house. However, Allison seemed to have disappeared without a trace. 8 days later, they discovered Allison's identification on a coffee plantation. This was surprising because they had checked the area several times before. What was even more suspicious was that her ID was placed in such a conspicuous and clean location. As if someone had intentionally placed it there to mislead the investigation or hide something. 15 days after Allison went missing, Yendrai received a call from Allison's father. Instead of showing concern or offering help, he said that Allison was missing because she was too beautiful. Shocked by these insensitive words, Yendrai immediately hung up the phone, unable to believe what she had just heard. For a long time, the family, police, and volunteers continued to search for Allison. Every Sunday, they hung up posters with her picture. One day, they decided to paint messages on the streets, recreating Allison's journey from the intersection to the bridge, where she was believed to have disappeared. They also put up posters on roadside poles to attract the attention of passers-by. At the same time, the police received an important clue. A man came to the police station and said that he knew Allison and had seen her on the night she disappeared. According to the man, at around 8:30 p.m. On March 4th, he left his home on his motorbike to pick someone up. On the way, he saw Allison and a burgundy two-door BMW parked next to her. He turned around to check on the situation and realized it was his cousin's BMW. He was 100% sure of this because the car had distinctive bright yellow headlights. Another witness also confirmed to the police that he had seen the same BMW near where Allison went missing that evening. The car belonged to Nelson Sanchez Urania, 28, nicknamed Sukia. Locals called him that because they believed he was a member of a gang in the area. In fact, Nelson and Allison knew each other. Their families had been acquainted for a long time and had lived in the same neighborhood for a while. However, according to Allison's mother, they had only interacted with Nelson a few times. It was just a normal neighborly relationship, not a close friendship. One day, Nelson offered to give Allison and her cousins a ride home. She agreed because it was morning, she was not alone. And she thought Nelson was a good person. On March 2nd, 2020, 2 days before Allison went missing, Nelson contacted her via Facebook. He sent a message asking Allison to answer some questions. On her cousin's advice, Allison agreed to answer them. Next, Nelson asked Allison about her feelings for him. Specifically, he wanted to know if Allison liked him. Allison was confused by Nelson's sudden question, as they were not close and barely knew each other. When Allison asked why, Nelson explained that he did not have a negative opinion of her but wanted to know if she thought badly of him. Allison reassured Nelson that she did not hate him and that everything was normal between them. Nelson thanked her and said goodbye. Police searched Nelson's home and seized his car, cell phone, and computer. Investigators found shocking images of women being abused on his phone. When they inspected the car, they found that it had been thoroughly cleaned with car polish. However, the front driver's seat carpet and trunk carpet had been removed. Police found hair and blood on the trunk lid and sent samples to a lab for analysis. After examining the exterior of the car, police used a police dog to search for traces. The dog detected possible blood on the 2 front seats and in the trunk. To confirm, the police used a luminol test, a chemical that reacts with hemoglobin in the blood. The results showed that there were many blood stains on the car's interior, despite the owner's efforts to remove them with cleaning products. While waiting for the results from the lab, Nelson remained free but was closely monitored by the police. They monitored his every move to prevent him from leaving the city or the country. Although Yendrai repeatedly requested his arrest, the police did not have enough evidence to do so. Therefore, Nelson continued to live freely without being prosecuted for many months. Yendrai believed that Allison had been kidnapped for ransom. She tried to stay calm and hoped that her daughter was still alive. In preparation for Allison's return, Yendrai kept her daughter's room as it was, not cleaning or rearranging the furniture. She even bought Allison a gift. Yendrai told the press, "I will continue to do so. As long as there is no evidence that she is dead, I still believe that my daughter is alive and will return home." Laboratory test results confirmed that the hair and blood found in Nelson's car belonged to Allison. The police immediately arrested Nelson. Later, his ex-girlfriend told the police that Nelson had never physically abused her but had put a lot of mental pressure on their relationship. Specifically, he forbade her from contacting her friends and using the internet. According to her, Nelson only wanted to have a sexual relationship with her. His previous boss revealed that he was very irresponsible at work and even stole about $11,000. Additionally, his landlord said an ex-girlfriend had broken up with him because she was tired of paying his debts. She described him as a very spoiled man. After that, Nelson confessed to his crimes against Allison. He said that on the night of Allison's disappearance, he found her walking alone on a deserted road. Taking advantage of the late hour and their acquaintance, Nelson offered to give Allison a ride. She agreed and got into the car without suspicion. However, instead of taking her home, Nelson drove to a remote coffee plantation and forced Allison out of the car. Nelson violently attacked her, knocking off her glasses and leaving her nearly unconscious. He dragged her to a nearby abandoned house, where he raped and brutally beat her. Nelson then tied her hands with cloth and duct tape to the front seat of his car. Finally, he stuffed her into the trunk of the car and drove to a dumpster in San Giorano Cacci. There, the killer pushed Allison off a cliff into a pile of trash below. He justified his heinous actions by saying that he was under the influence of drugs. He also admitted that he had long been obsessed with Allison, and when he saw her that night, he decided it was his chance to carry out his dark intentions. Surprisingly, Nelson later recanted his initial statement, accusing the police of coercing him into confessing. However, the authorities had enough evidence to charge him despite his denials. The suspect could face a maximum sentence of 35 years in prison. In the early morning of September 4th, a search party went to the San Anno landfill to look for Allison's body. However, because the area was large and difficult to access, finding Allison's remains was an extremely difficult task. Moreover, it had been 6 months since Allison went missing. Just 25 days after Allison confessed, the police discovered a number of important pieces of evidence. They found human bone fragments, including a spine, ribs, part of the pelvis, and a femur. They also found pieces of clothing that Allison was wearing on the day she disappeared, along with a pair of sneakers with studs inside. All of these clues were sent for testing and thorough analysis by the police. Jose Francisco Herrera, the suspect's defense attorney, questioned the authenticity of the evidence because it was found by volunteers, not professional police. He also said that the discovery of the remains coincided with the time his client declared his innocence, which was suspicious. Rodrigo Era, the attorney representing Allison's family, on the other hand, criticized the suspect's change of testimony, saying that it undermined the credibility of the official investigation. On October 5, 2020, experts confirmed that the remains found belonged to Allison. Because only a partial body was found, they were unable to determine the exact cause of death. However, examination of the remains revealed multiple fractures that appeared after death, suggesting she may have fallen from a great height. Her clothes were torn and her sneakers had bite marks, suggesting a possible animal attack. This would explain why the remains were found scattered in different areas of the landfill. Allison's mother, Yendrai, is furious with the police for not listening and acting promptly. She believes that if they had arrested Nelson sooner, he would have confessed and Allison's body would have been found in better condition. This is an irreparable loss for the family. Despite the terrible pain she is enduring, Yendrai finds some solace in saying, "My daughter is in a better place now, where no one can hurt her anymore." The trial of Nelson took place on July 19, 2021. Harold, Allison's boyfriend, was a key witness in the case. According to Harold's testimony, on the afternoon of March 4, 2020, at approximately 6:30 p.m., he returned home and found Allison there with her mother. Harold then left for approximately 5 to 10 minutes. When he returned, he discovered that Allison had left without saying anything. While Allison was on her way home, Harold texted her repeatedly. As soon as she got off the bus, Allison texted Harold to say that two men were following her. Concerned for her safety, Harold suggested that she take a taxi and promised to pay for it. However, Allison refused twice and said that she would run home. Harold did not receive any further response from Allison after that text message. According to his explanation, he only informed his mother of the situation. He did not contact Allison's mother, Yendrai, because his phone battery died. He then fell asleep for about 30 minutes. It was Allison's aunt who called him to inform him that his girlfriend was missing. Since then, he said he has been worried and tried to call Allison several times, but all the calls went to voicemail. He also could not be reached via WhatsApp messages. Harold said he joined the search party for a few days but then had to stop because he felt unwell and had to go to work. He really wished things had gone differently. If he could go back in time, he would have taken Allison home that night. However, unfortunately, what happened cannot be changed. On August 18, 2021, the court sentenced Nelson to 18 years in prison for taking the life of Allison. He could have received twice the sentence, but the judge pointed out that there was no evidence to confirm that Nelson knew the route and time Allison would return home and that he planned to attack her. Furthermore, due to the condition of Allison's remains, there was no evidence that Nelson forced her to have sex. The story does not end there. Allison's family was not satisfied with the original sentence, arguing that it was not commensurate with the crime. In 2022, they successfully appealed, and the court decided to retry the case. As a result, on September 28, 2023, Nelson was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Allison's family's lawyer emphasized that Nelson acted in a cruel and inhumane manner and took advantage of the trust of the victim and her relatives. The court ruled that Nelson's actions were intentional. Nelson used his long-standing relationship with Allison to commit the crime. The criminal court also took into account Nelson's lack of remorse for his actions. Although still hurt and angry, the victim's family was relieved by the new verdict. The decision ended a painful chapter in their lives that lasted more than 3 years and put an end to this nightmare. Allison's family created a memorial at the spot where her body was found. They placed a cross, flowers, and a small altar with a photo of Allison and a statue of the Virgin Mary. Allison's case has caused a stir in Costa Rican media and social media. It has also led to many marches in memory of Allison and other women who have been victims of similar violence. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Allison Baden-Clay. Allison Baden-Clay was born on July 1, 1968 in a suburb of Brisbane. She grew up in a wealthy family and developed a love for ballet from an early age. After completing her schooling, she pursued further studies and proved herself to be an excellent student, fluent in 6 languages. In 1993, at the age of 25, Allison entered a local beauty pageant, where she impressed the audience with her ballet skills. She then began her professional career in the Human Resources Department at the Brisbane Flight Centre. Here, her career progressed rapidly after her talent was recognized by her boss. It was while working at the center that she met her future husband, Gerard. Gerard Baden-Clay was born on September 9, 1970 in Bournemouth, United Kingdom. Gerard comes from a distinguished lineage, with his great-grandfather, Robert Baden-Powell, a prominent British military leader and founder of the Scouting movement. Gerard moved to Zambia with his family when he was 1 year old, as it was the homeland of his father, Nigel Clay. They remained in Zambia for 8 years before migrating to Australia. Gerard then completed his studies in Australia, graduating with a degree in accounting. He eventually joined the Brisbane Flight Centre, where he met Allison. Gerard met Allison at the Brisbane Flight Centre, marking the beginning of their romance. They married on August 23, 1997 and then went on a trip around the world, visiting several countries including South America and Switzerland, with a temporary stay in London. When they returned to Australia, Allison returned to work at the flight centre, eventually being promoted to a management position. In 2002, Allison became pregnant and gave birth to her first child, a daughter named Hannah. After Hannah was born, Allison decided to focus solely on raising her children and taking care of her family. Gerard made several career changes during this time and opened a luxury real estate company in Brisbane in 2004. With the help of his parents, he invested a lot of time and effort into the business. The Gerard family had a second daughter, Sarah, born in 2004, followed by their youngest child, Ella, born in 2006. The family lived in a rented house in Brookfield, a suburb of Brisbane. Meanwhile, Allison spent most of her time looking after the girls at home. Over time, Allison began to notice that Gerard was increasingly distant from her. This eventually led to a shocking confession that he no longer loved her. Gerard's behavior towards Allison changed dramatically. He constantly criticized her, complaining about the meals she cooked and the cleanliness of the house. He called her lazy and said she was no longer attractive to him. Allison chose to remain silent in the face of these hurtful comments. In her diary, she poured out her heart, expressing her enduring love for Gerard, their frequent arguments, her feelings of guilt and her determination to change to win his love back. Allison hid her family troubles behind a cheerful exterior, making her appear to be a warm, caring person, a devoted mother and a loving wife. However, her family life took a difficult turn in 2011. Gerard's business suffered after the Queensland floods, resulting in a significant debt of around $1 million Australian dollars. That same year, in October, Allison discovered that Gerard was secretly having an affair with Tony McHugh, a co-worker. Gerard and Tony met in 2008 when Tony was a client, and Gerard hired her. At the time, Tony was having marital problems after 17 years of marriage, which eventually led to Tony's divorce. Tony knew Gerard was married, but Gerard said that the relationship with Allison was loveless and that he was only staying for their daughter. Gerard promised Tony a future together, and that he would marry her. In October 2011, Allison discovered that Gerard was having an affair with Tony. Gerard immediately ended the relationship and severed ties with Tony by firing her from his real estate company and reconciled with Allison. Tony still harbored hopes for a future with Gerard. For months later, In April 2012, Tony and Gerard were talking on the phone while Tony was driving home. They discussed an upcoming real estate conference, and Gerard casually mentioned that Tony would be meeting Allison there the next day. This revelation upset Tony, causing her to question the promises he had made to her, and to call him dishonest. Gerard apologized to Tony, reaffirmed his love for her, and reiterated his commitment to ending his marriage to Allison within 3 months. The following morning, April 20th, at 7:14 a.m., Gerard contacted the police in a distressed state, reporting that Allison had gone missing after going for a walk around 10 p.m. the night before. When police arrived at Gerard's home, they noticed deep, curved scratches on his face, which he claimed he had sustained while shaving. Further examination revealed small red marks on his chest, which Gerard explained were from a moth bite he had encountered while changing an outdoor light. A search of the house revealed no signs of a disturbance. Everything was in order, and the bed was made. Despite his stress, Gerard appeared calm and began getting his daughters ready for school and daycare. Police interviewed Hannah, Sarah, and Ella, who reported falling asleep after their mother turned off the lights and had not seen her since. During questioning, the crying girls described their parents as a happy and generally harmonious couple. Police searched the area and spoke to neighbors, but no one witnessed anything unusual. The only initial clues found were a small bloodstain on Allison's car and a strand of her hair in the trunk. A large-scale search operation soon followed, with rescue teams and volunteers searching woods, wells, manholes, and dams near the Allison family home. To aid the search efforts, a mannequin was placed wearing an outfit similar to Allison's last known outfit to aid the search efforts. As time went on, the chances of finding Allison alive diminished. Her friends clung to hope, not wanting to think the worst. Gerard appeared visibly upset as he tearfully pleaded with his wife to return, in front of the media. Behind the scenes, however, he instructed his lover, Tony, to keep quiet and put their relationship on hold, promising to reunite in the future. 10 days after Allison went missing, a boater made a horrifying discovery on the banks of Colorado Creek, about 8 miles from the Allison family home, on April 30th, 2012. The body was found in an advanced state of decomposition. The day after Allison's body was discovered, Gerard contacted his insurance company to inquire about filing an $800,000 life insurance claim on his wife. A medical examiner later formally identified the body as Allison Baden-Clay, 43, using dental records. Notably, Allison was still wearing the same clothes she had been wearing when she went missing. A post-mortem examination found that Allison's death was likely due to strangulation. Her death was therefore classified as a homicide, although determining the exact cause was difficult due to the advanced stage of decomposition of the body. On May 11, 2012, St. Paul's Cathedral in Brisbane held a funeral for Allison Baden-Clay, who had tragically passed away. Her husband, Gerard, was visibly overcome with emotion, crying throughout the service as he consoled his daughters and consoled Allison's parents. Hundreds of people attended the service. However, while Gerard was apparently mourning his wife's death, he was secretly communicating with his mistress, Tony, through public phone calls. He informed her of Allison's passing and urged her to keep their affair a secret from the police investigation. Meanwhile, the police began to question the story Gerard had given them. He claimed that Allison had gone for a walk around 10 p.m. and was gone when he woke up. However, conflicting evidence emerged. Police found that Gerard had charged his phone at 2 a.m. and was on his computer at 5 a.m., and forensic analysis showed that the marks on his cheeks were consistent with fingernail scratches. In addition, no blood was found on his razor. A biologist disputed Gerard's explanation of the caterpillar bites on his chest, stating that no caterpillars in the family's area could have caused such injuries. A separate expert examined Allison's hair and found 5 different types of leaves: eucalyptus, Chinese elm, myrtle, cat's claw vine, and herringbone fern. 2 of these, eucalyptus and Chinese elm, were found growing directly under the bridge where Allison's body was discovered. In addition, all 5 types of leaves and thorns were found in the Allison family's backyard. On June 13, 2012, a month after Allison's funeral, 41-year-old Gerard Badenclay was arrested and charged with his wife's murder. He maintained his innocence and claimed he would fight the charges and applied for bail, which was immediately denied due to concerns that he might flee. During the investigation, police spoke to Tony, who revealed their 4-year secret relationship to Gerard. It was also discovered that just days before Allison went missing, Gerard had sent Tony a letter promising to be with Tony on July 1st. Further complicating the case. The prosecution's theory was that Gerard had killed his wife, Allison, to collect life insurance money and pay off debts. They believed he also planned to move on with Tony McHugh. According to their theory, a fight broke out on the evening of April 19, 2012, while Gerard and Allison were watching TV after their daughters had gone to bed. During the argument, Allison allegedly scratched Gerard's cheek, leaving her fingernails to collect DNA evidence. Unfortunately, the DNA had degraded, making it impossible to determine its source. The prosecution claimed that Gerard strangled Allison, then dragged her body through the backyard, leaving her hair tangled with leaves. Gerard placed her body in the trunk of his car and drove to a nearby river, where he dumped her body under a bridge. The prosecution believed that Gerard thought the river would wash her body away, effectively covering up his crime. Gerard then allegedly returned home, charged his phone, cleaned the house, and reported Allison missing the next morning. After finding Allison's body, Gerard hired a criminal defense attorney and went to see him. During Gerard's 2014 murder trial for Allison, prosecutors were convinced that Gerard was guilty and argued that he had killed her. However, Gerard maintained that he had nothing to do with her death. He admitted that he and Allison had argued and suggested that she may have left the house late one night because she was depressed and may have taken her own life. However, Allison's family and friends rejected this idea. They were certain that Allison would never leave her daughters, as she loved them very much. Her friends had long spoken out against Gerard, describing him as arrogant, fake, and self-centered. They believed that Allison's deep love for him blinded her to these negative traits. During the trial, excerpts from Allison's diary were presented as evidence. The diary revealed how isolated she felt and how controlling Gerard was, especially after the birth of their first child. She described feeling trapped at home and detailed several instances of Gerard's controlling behavior. This included insulting her, monitoring her conversations with a baby monitor, controlling her finances, deleting relatives' contact details from her phone and blocking their calls. After Allison's death, Gerard's attempts to make an insurance claim were rejected, with the money being withheld until the trial was over. Another important testimony came from Melissa Romano, who had never met Gerard in person but had spoken to him on the phone in 2009 about a real estate deal. She testified that after the deal was finalized, Gerard called her out of the blue, suggesting, "I'm looking for someone to kill my wife." Melissa, stunned, questioned his motives, but Gerard abruptly redirected the conversation and ended the call. This testimony played a key role in the case against Gerard, which on July 15, 2014, Gerard Badenclay was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 15 years. In 2015, Gerard appealed his conviction, and the court reclassified the crime to involuntary manslaughter, shortening his prison term. However, the decision sparked widespread outrage, with around 4,000 people demonstrating in support of Allison's family. In response to public sentiment, in 2016, Australia's High Court overturned the Court of Appeal's decision, reinstating the original murder conviction. As a result, Gerard will not be eligible for parole until at least 2027. During his incarceration, Gerard initially behaved like a model prisoner. However, over time, he adapted to prison life and became less restrained in his behavior, leading to an incident where he clashed with a prison guard, which resulted in a stern reprimand. Following Gerard Baden-Clay's trial, his former lover, Tony McHugh, moved to Bali, where she spent her time teaching and doing charity work. 4 years later, she moved to the United Arab Emirates to continue her education career. Tony now lives a private life, keeping her personal information private. She occasionally connects with friends on social media using a private account, as she fears that Gerard may try to find her after his release. In a recent public statement, Tony expressed remorse for her actions and clarified that she never intended to cause Allison any harm. Allison's daughters Hannah, Sarah and Ella Baden-Clay are living with her parents. Allison's assets, including her insurance money, have been passed on to her children. After completing her university studies in 2022, Hannah has followed in her mother's footsteps by pursuing a career in dance. In memory of her sister Allison, Vanessa set up a charity to combat domestic violence and support those affected, while raising awareness of the issue. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Heather Maples. Heather Maples, just 22 years old, has just started college, settled into a job, and feels life is full of promise. She radiates warmth and energy, and is always helpful to those around her. On the morning of August 7, 2015, Heather's co-worker Kelsey Price arrived at her real estate brokerage firm in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and began her daily routine. Heather had not yet arrived at work, which did not surprise Kelsey, as Heather was notorious for being late. Kelsey began calling Heather to wake her up but received no response. The night before, Heather had planned to go to a bar with some friends and had asked Kelsey to pick her up if she overslept or did not answer the phone. Kelsey was not concerned and went to Heather's apartment to wake her up. The girls' apartments were in the same complex where they worked. When Kelsey arrived, she found the front door unlocked. When she entered, she found her friend Heather lying on the bed, sleeping on her stomach, wearing only a crop top and no underwear. Thinking that Heather had been partying the night before, Kelsey tried to wake her but received no response. She gently tapped Heather's leg to wake her up, but when she touched it, she was shocked to find it was ice cold. Terrified, Kelsey walked out of the apartment and called 911. Emergency services arrived quickly, with police officer Tommy Massey being one of the first to arrive on the scene, followed by a forensic team who thoroughly examined the apartment. They found that Heather was partially undressed and had bruises on her face. The poor girl's hair was bloody, and blood was also splattered on the walls. It was clear that she had been brutally beaten, tortured, and sexually assaulted. Heather Maples was born on August 23, 1992 in Ocala, Florida. Her mother affectionately called Heather her "Storm Baby," a nickname that perfectly reflected her energy and courage. In 2004, Heather's mother, Jennifer Hunter, welcomed her second child, a son named Ryan. Heather happily embraced her new role as a big sister, however Ryan was later diagnosed with developmental delays. Heather devoted all of her free time to her brother, teaching him to talk, walk, and feed himself. Heather was in 7th grade at the time and spent the following years until Ryan's graduation with her, showing her endless love and devotion to her younger brother. At 22, Heather Maples decided to leave her hometown in Texas and start a new chapter in Tennessee to pursue her dream of becoming a psychologist. Her journey began when her old classmate Chaz called her and invited her to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where he was a student. He described it as the perfect small town for Heather, offering her a great opportunity to prepare for college. Heather agreed and moved to Murfreesboro in January 2015. Soon after arriving, her friendship with Chaz blossomed into a romantic relationship, launching her into a new phase of her life. With the help of her best friend Kelsey, Heather got a job at the office of the housing complex where they lived. Heather was trying to balance her work and preparing for college. She had the support of her friends and family, and things seemed to be going well. However, her relationship with Chaz began to deteriorate, eventually leading to their breakup and Chaz moving out. In early August, she called her mother excitedly to share the great news: she had been accepted to college. Her mother was extremely proud of Heather's achievements. However, a week later, Heather did not show up for work, causing concern among those around her. The police realized that given the nature of the crime, it could be related to Heather's personal life. At the time, most of her friends were considered potential suspects, and there was good reason for this suspicion. After searching the apartment, the police found no signs of forced entry. This suggested that Heather may have known the attackers and may have let them in. During the investigation, several key pieces of evidence were discovered, including unidentified DNA and a hair that did not belong to Heather. These samples were sent for analysis to help identify the suspect. The most important evidence was a bloody fingerprint that was clearly found on the right side of Heather's bed. Police Tommy noted that if someone had intentionally left the stain, it would not have been so clear and precise. This fingerprint was also sent for analysis. In addition, Heather's cell phone was found in the apartment, but there was no password, so the contents could not be accessed. However, Kelsey returned the phone password to the police, and she informed Heather's mother about her death. Police Tommy hoped to gather more information about Heather from Kelsey, especially about Heather's personal life and her relationship with Chaz. Kelsey told the police that Heather's relationship with Chaz was very tense due to his lack of anger control, which often made him aggressive and unkind to Heather. Therefore, Heather chose to end the relationship. This prompted the police to start investigating Chaz. However, things took an unexpected turn when a young man named Michael tried to enter the crime scene, ignoring the warning tape. He had a key to Heather's apartment. According to Michael, the night before Heather died, she called him and invited him to dinner, and he agreed. After dinner, he went home, while Heather went to a local bar with friends. Heather then contacted Michael for help. She called me at 11:40 and said I needed to come to the bar because she really needed my help, Michael recalled. There were people hitting on her and she was upset. Okay, I'll be there, he replied. Michael explained that Heather was in trouble. A young man named Ottavio had been bothering her and was aggressive. After the incident, he offered to drive Heather home. She ordered biscuit gravy, 2 eggs and sausage. Then I drove her home, he recalled. According to Michael, he last saw Heather at about 2:30 a.m. on August 7th. During questioning, he noted that Heather's front door should have been unlocked because he had her keys. She was wearing a dress that didn't have pockets for them, and he forgot to return them after unlocking the door. Michael appeared frustrated and seemingly honest, but the police still needed to get his fingerprints and DNA. The police contacted the bar to request surveillance footage, which confirmed Michael's statement during questioning. Further analysis showed that the fingerprints and DNA collected at the crime scene did not match Michael. After he was cleared as a suspect, the focus shifted to Ottavio, the man who had been with Heather that night. With Kelsey's help in accessing Heather's cell phone, the police's interest in Ottavio increased significantly. They found text messages from Heather to Ottavio, inviting him to her apartment just hours before her death. The police asked Kelsey if she knew anything about Ottavio. Kelsey didn't know much about him, but he seemed like a really nice guy with a good sense of humor. The police were puzzled as to why Heather would invite Ottavio to her house after Michael had just saved her from him at the bar. The police then questioned Ottavio, asking him what he had been doing yesterday afternoon. Ottavio said that he had been spending time with Heather. They had some tequila and then went to the gym. The police then asked about Heather's late-night text messages. Ottavio replied that she had sent him a text message around 2:30. When asked if he had seen the text message, he admitted that he had, but said that he had been asleep at the time and had only seen it this morning. He reiterated that he had discovered it this morning because he had been asleep. The police pressed Ottavio harder, using a rigorous interrogation technique that not all suspects could handle. Witnesses saw you enter the apartment. Phone records confirm you were there. You were with her yesterday. Ottavio claims she texted him to come back and that he did not return afterwards. Ottavio asks the police what happened to her, and is shocked to hear them say that she was raped and died at her home. In disbelief, he exclaims that it cannot be true. The police inform him that there is DNA all over her. Ottavio is shocked by this revelation, seemingly unaware of what happened to Heather. After questioning, he readily agrees to a DNA test, believing that it will exonerate him. The results confirm his innocence as the DNA found at the crime scene does not match his, leading to his being eliminated as a suspect. With no leads, the police work almost around the clock, reviewing surveillance footage and scrutinizing every detail provided by witnesses. On the 9th day of the investigation, as Officer Tommy prepares to leave the office late at night, he receives an important call from the director of the forensics lab. Tommy finally gets the answer regarding the bloody fingerprints taken from Heather's bed. They belong to a young man named Brandon Bowling. The police then ask Brandon how he met Heather, and he says they met at the gym. Tommy starts the questioning gently, giving Brandon a chance to explain what happened that night. He asks if Brandon has ever been to her apartment, and Brandon confirms that he has. Brandon recalls that every time he has been there, she has left the door unlocked. Tommy then asks him if he has ever had sex with her. Brandon confirms that he has, and that they have had sex twice. Tommy continues to ask when was the last time he was at her apartment, and Brandon says that it was probably in July. Tommy continues to ask him why his fingerprints were on the bed, and Brandon insists that he did nothing to her. She had just been accepted to college and he was happy for her. He continues to deny any involvement in Heather's death. After questioning, the police asked Brandon to take a DNA test, arguing that if he was innocent, the test would prove it. Brandon agreed, presumably hoping to be released from police custody, but that did not happen. The police decided not to wait for the test results. They had found substantial grounds for the next step based on the fingerprint match. The police immediately filed a request with the court for permission to access Brandon's phone, which could help confirm his actions and monitor calls and texts on the night of the incident. After receiving court approval, the video from Brandon's phone was one of the most shocking discoveries, even for the most experienced police officers. In the video, Brandon recorded everything from intimate acts to beatings. Heather was still alive at the time of the recording. In February 2018, Brandon Bowling pleaded guilty to assaulting Heather Maples. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison without the possibility of parole. When the trial ended, Heather's mother, Jennifer, approached Bowling's mother in the hallway. Jennifer simply hugged the woman, saying that they had both lost children that day. Unfortunately, Brandon Bowling never explained his motives. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lori Slasinski. Lori Slasinski was born on September 21, 1981, to her parents, Casey and Arlene Slasinski. With her blue eyes and blonde hair, Lori was cherished by her family, including her older brother, Paul. The Slasinski family originally hailed from New York State but moved to the rural Alabama farmland near Auburn when Lori was 13 years old. Growing up in the countryside, Lori developed a strong love for animals. Her friends described her as beautiful, and she enjoyed spending time with them, watching movies, riding her bicycle, and playing video games. Alongside her enjoyment of life, she was quite dedicated to her studies, and her family did their best to support her. After graduating from high school, Lori decided to attend Auburn University, where she chose to major in psychology and minor in criminology. To help her transition to college life, her parents purchased a mobile home for her to live in off-campus, situated in a well-kept trailer park popular among students. She lived there with her cherished dog, Peanut, a Yorkshire Terrier. Lori maintained a strong relationship with her family, with her mother calling her every day to see how she was doing. In 2005, she graduated with honors from Auburn University. Shortly after, she started working at the East Alabama Mental Health Center while continuing to live in a trailer park. She also planned to pursue a master's degree in psychology in the near future. Lori's family was proud of her accomplishments, unaware of the trouble that was on the horizon. On June 10, 2006, 24-year-old Lori planned a girls' night at her best friend Lindsay Braun's house. They intended to have drinks and watch a movie. Lori met Lindsay in their junior year at Auburn University, and they quickly became friends due to Lori's sweet and outgoing personality. Their friendship strengthened further when they both started working at the same mental health facility after graduation. Around 6:30 p.m. on June 10th, Lori called Lindsay to say she was stopping at the store before heading to her house for movie night. Unfortunately, she never arrived. Lindsay became concerned when she didn't hear from Lori that night or the next day. She called Lori multiple times and left messages on her answering machine but received no response. When Lori failed to show up for work on Monday, June 12, Lindsay became very worried. It was unusual for Lori to miss work without notifying anyone. After Lori missed work again on Tuesday, June 13, Lindsay and another coworker decided to check on her at home. When they arrived at Lori's trailer, Lindsay noticed that Lori was not there. The door was unlocked and the air conditioning was running, which was unexpected. Inside, Lindsay saw that Lori's dog, Peanut, was in his crate. He appeared healthy and content, suggesting that someone had been taking care of him. Remarkably, his crate was clean, despite Lori being missing for several days. Lindsay sensed something was wrong, as it was unusual for Lori to leave her pet unattended. She recalled that Lori had placed 3 rugs on her kitchen floor because the dog wouldn't walk on the tile. However, those rugs were now missing, as well as the outside trash can. Later that day, June 13, 2006, Lori's mother, Arlene, received a call from her workplace about Lori missing work for 2 consecutive days. Arlene tried calling Lori but couldn't reach her. Concerned for her daughter's safety, Arlene hurried to Auburn after informing her husband, Casey, about Lori's disappearance. When she arrived, Arlene entered Lori's trailer and noticed something was off. The door was slightly open, and Lori's bed was neatly made, but Lori was nowhere to be found. Her car was also missing. Upon further inspection, Arlene saw that several items were missing: Lori's kitchen rugs, a pillow from her couch, a Galileo thermometer, a green trash can that Lori used for her rake and shovel, and the phone cord for her landline. A sense of alarm started to rise in Arlene as she understood that something terrible had happened. She officially reported her daughter missing, but still holding out hope that she would return. The police began their investigation and searched Lori's trailer home. While they didn't find any clear evidence pointing to a suspect, they did see signs of a struggle and scuff marks on the wall. On the bed sheet, they discovered semen and found traces of blood on the doorknob. A coat hanger and a single golden hoop earring were also collected from the scene. On June 10, 2006, police obtained surveillance footage showing Lori at an Alabama Walmart, marking the last confirmed sighting of her. After this, no one knew what had happened to her. Later that afternoon, Arlene received a phone call from one of Lori's friends, a 25-year-old named Daryl Richard Ennis, commonly known as Rick. He claimed he had seen Lori on the day she went missing and suggested that she might have gone off to make a drug deal. Lori had met Daryl at the bowling alley where he worked and often spent time there while she was a student. Arlene recognized Daryl because Lori had invited him to celebrate Christmas with their family in 2005, feeling sorry for him since he had no family of his own. However, Arlene found it hard to believe Daryl's story. Despite Lori's friendship with him, she was convinced her daughter would never be involved in drug dealing. Arlene suspected that Daryl was lying but had no idea why he would make such a claim. Daryl provided the police with information about Lori's disappearance, but before they could act on it, a shocking discovery occurred. On June 14, 2006, just 4 days after Lori went missing, her car was discovered fully engulfed in flames near the bowling alley where Daryl had previously worked. This shifted the investigation from a missing persons case to a potential homicide. Investigators noted that the fire destroyed any evidence that might have been in the car, but Lori was not inside when it burned. Nearby, a hand-rolled cigarette was found on the ground, along with a gas can located in the woods. This incident deeply distressed Lori's family, leading them to believe that something terrible had happened to her. The only lead they had at the time was the information provided to Arlene. When Daryl was questioned, he repeated the same story he had told Arlene but added more details. He stated that he and Lori had grown marijuana together and suggested that she might have gone off to sell her portion of it. He also mentioned that Lori could have been involved with some dangerous people. The police searched Lori's trailer, but despite a thorough investigation, they found no evidence of her dealing drugs. During the interview, investigators noticed several scratches on Daryl's hands and arms, which he said were from his dog. Investigators uncovered troubling information from Lori's friend, Lindsay. During their last phone conversation on the day Lori disappeared, Lindsay heard Daryl speaking in the background. Since Daryl was a friend of Lori's, Lindsay didn't think much of it at the time. When Lindsay texted him to ask about Lori's whereabouts, he replied that Lori was fine when he left her. Lindsay also told investigators that before Lori went missing, she had mentioned that he had written her a love letter, but she did not feel the same way. Lori had expressed to Lindsay that she was not romantically interested in Daryl and intended to discuss this with him. Investigators later learned that Daryl had informed his friends about his letter and Lori's rejection. When police re-interviewed him to confront him with new information from Lindsay, he admitted to meeting her just hours before Lori disappeared. He maintained that Lori was in good spirits and was getting ready to go to the store when he left her house. However, detectives identified several inconsistencies in his story, which led them to consider Daryl their main suspect. Their suspicion intensified after searching his car, where they found several significant items, including a knife, cleaning supplies, and handcuffs. Investigators started digging into Daryl's past to find more evidence, but they were unprepared for the shocking discoveries. They uncovered that Daryl, at just 12 years old, had murdered his mother and stepfather. On March 3, 1993, only 10 months after their marriage, Daryl killed his mother, a well-liked churchgoer, by first shooting her in the face and then beating her to death with a baseball bat in their trailer in North Montgomery, Alabama. His stepfather, Eddie Joe Flowers, suffered the same fate when Daryl shot him in the face with a shotgun upon his return from work. After the murders, Daryl drove the family car and crashed it into a fence along the highway. Alabama State Trooper John Clark found Daryl walking on the road. When asked about his parents, Daryl admitted that he had killed them. During a search of the backpack he was carrying, Detective Clark discovered a kitchen knife and ammunition for both a 12-gauge shotgun and a .22 caliber firearm. When questioned about his motives, the emotionless 12-year-old stated that he was angry because his parents planned to move, and he didn't want to leave his school. Investigators believe that Daryl lived with his parents' bodies while still attending school. He also confessed that he intended to kill his 3 stepsisters, which shocked the investigators. Although his murders were horrific, he was too young to be tried as an adult. As a minor, he received a 9-year prison sentence for the double murder. After his release, he moved to Auburn, where he met Lori Slasinski. When Lori went missing, Darryl became the main suspect. However, despite his criminal history and the abundance of circumstantial evidence, authorities could not charge him with Lori's murder without her body or any direct evidence linking him to the crime. A few weeks after being interviewed by detectives, he left Auburn and eventually settled in Huntsville, Alabama, in 2007. By that time, Lori's case had grown cold. After moving to Huntsville, Darryl quickly moved in with a roommate named Abram. Abram noticed that Darryl had brought kitchen rugs with him, which he said were a gift from someone. Darryl also mentioned to Abram that he was in love with a woman from Auburn who had mysteriously disappeared, but he did not reveal her name. Abram thought these conversations were normal until he discovered his troubling past. This prompted him to ask Darryl to leave immediately. When Abram returned to his apartment, he found it in complete disarray. The police later recovered the rugs, and one of them tested positive for Darryl's blood. Abram also recalled seeing a Galileo thermometer in Darryl's room before he moved in, which was the same type that was missing from Lori's home. Unfortunately, the police were still unable to connect Darryl to Lori's murder, as the main suspect remained unidentified. The case stayed unresolved, leaving Lori's heartbroken family searching for answers for years. For many years, there were no developments in the case. Then, in 2016, Mark Whitaker, a special agent with the Alabama State Bureau of Investigation, established a cold case unit to re-examine Lori's disappearance. He worked with his longtime partner, Agent J.W. Barnes. Lori's case was their first focus. They revisited the evidence, sent some items to forensic labs for testing, and conducted multiple interviews. As they reviewed the evidence, Darryl became their primary suspect. Agent Mark was aware of Darryl's past and felt strongly that he had harmed Lori, but he struggled to find enough evidence or a body to prove his guilt. In an unexpected turn of events, Agent J.W. Barnes, who is Agent Mark's partner, discovered a crucial piece of evidence while reviewing old files. He found an unopened report in an envelope that had been untouched for 10 years. After Lori disappeared in 2006, the police collected evidence from her trailer, but no one followed up until the results were finally analyzed. The analysis revealed that semen found on Lori's bed sheet and blood on the inside of the front door matched the DNA of Darryl Ennis. With this evidence, investigators were able to build a strong case against him, leading to an indictment in 2018. At that time, Darryl was happily engaged to a school librarian named Elena Atkinson and was living in Pilot, Virginia, where he worked for a company that designed and built portable living structures called yurts. On August 6, 2018, which was his 38th birthday, Darryl Ennis was arrested by a U.S. Marshals task force 12 years after Lori Slasinski disappeared from Auburn. While Lori's family felt relieved, Darryl's fiancée and co-workers were taken aback by the news. He faced 2 counts of capital murder. The trail finally started on April 1, 2022. The prosecution presented evidence suggesting Darryl's involvement in the crime, including a cigarette butt found in Lori's bed sheet that contained his DNA. In response, the defense claimed that police might have taken the cigarette from Darryl's home and planted it at the scene. They also attempted to undermine Lori's character, suggesting she was a drug dealer to account for his DNA being on the bed sheet. Darryl claimed he had consensual sex with Lori before she disappeared, implying that they were still intimate despite her rejecting him. However, his account lacked credibility, especially after 2 witnesses provided shocking information. One former co-worker from Alabama, Jeremy Brooks, reported that on June 9, 2006, just 1 day before Lori's mysterious disappearance, he received a call from Darryl. He asked Jeremy if he could bring him gas and if he could keep the gas tank. Jeremy refused and recounted. He said he had run out of gas and wanted me to help him. Later, After police discovered Lori's burned car, they found a gas can that matched the description of a can missing from the bowling alley where Daryl worked. Terry Booth, a former co-worker from South Carolina, shared a disturbing experience she had with Daryl years earlier. She recalled asking him why he had moved from Auburn, to which he responded that he needed to get rid of a body. At the time, Terry believed he was joking, but Daryl's later arrest for the murder of Lori changed her perspective. Despite Daryl consistently denying the allegations and asserting his innocence, the jury reached a guilty verdict after 2 days of deliberation. He was initially facing the death penalty. However, the district attorney decided to remove that option after consulting with Arlene. Arlene expressed that agreeing to a life sentence without parole for Daryl would spare her from lengthy appeals while ensuring he would remain incarcerated permanently. On April 14, 2022, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and is currently held at the William E. Donaldson Correctional Facility in Bessemer, Alabama. For Arlene, this verdict brought mixed emotions. With tears in her eyes, she expressed that it forced her to confront the painful reality that Lori would never return home, a hope she had clung to in her heart. In reflecting on Lori Slasinski's tragic story, it's impossible to ignore the heart-wrenching details that unfolded throughout her case. From her vibrant personality and promising future to the chilling revelations of Daryl Ennis's past, every twist and turn serves as a reminder of the fragility of life. The love between Lori and her family, especially her mother Arlene, paints a poignant picture of loss and longing for closure. The perseverance of investigators and the eventual breakthrough in the cold case remind us that justice, though sometimes delayed, can still prevail. As we honor Lori's memory, we recognize the profound impact her life and disappearance have had on all who knew her, as well as the vital importance of safeguarding our communities from those with dark histories.